Across the world, ancient sites hold more than stone and ruin. They harbour mysteries that have baffled scientists for centuries. From the plains of Egypt to the mountains of Peru, travellers and researchers alike have encountered phenomena that defy explanation. Stones seem to hum, lights appear without a source, footprints vanish, and colossal structures shift in ways that challenge logic. These are not tales of legend alone, they are documented events, observed and studied, yet stubbornly resistant to scientific understanding. Through these stories you'll discover the strange forces, unexplained sounds, and sudden vanishings that have occurred in temples, tombs, and monuments. Each account reveals the hidden complexities of these sites and the subtle ways the past continues to astonish and unsettle, offering a glimpse into mysteries that science has yet to solve. The Nazca electromagnetic blackout. Across the southern desert of Peru, the Nazca lines stretch for miles across the arid plain, a silent gallery of colossal geoglyphs carved into the earth. Trapezoids, spirals, and figures of birds and beasts lie etched into the soil, visible only from the sky. They are so vast and precise that the question of their creation has fascinated archaeologists for nearly a century. Yet, among the many theories about how and why the lines were made, one incident has unsettled researchers far more than any ancient mystery: an unexplained blackout that left an entire survey team in stunned silence. In 2010, a team of geospatial scientists arrived to conduct high-resolution electromagnetic mapping over a section of the Pampa de San Jose. Their goal was to measure subsurface density and magnetic variation to determine whether ancient builders might have followed natural magnetic lines when shaping the geoglyphs. The desert air was still and dry, the conditions ideal for their instruments. The plane flew at low altitude, tracing pre-programmed flight paths across the plateau. For several hours, everything followed routine procedure until, without warning, the instruments went dark. At precisely 11:46 a.m., both GPS and magnetometer readings collapsed into static. The aircraft's navigation system flickered, radio communication filled with bursts of distortion, and data logging ceased entirely. The pilot reported no turbulence, no visible storm, no solar flare warning, and no engine irregularity. It was as if an invisible curtain had dropped across the sky, silencing every electrical pulse in its reach. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the systems resumed. Total duration: 2 minutes and 17 seconds. When the team returned to base, they reviewed the raw data. The recordings showed a dense spike of magnetic interference centered directly above one of the oldest geoglyphs, a trapezoidal formation nearly 400 meters long. The anomaly registered at a strength far exceeding what could be produced by ordinary geological features. Even more curious was the precision of its boundary. The disturbance appeared and vanished within a sharply defined perimeter, as though confined to the airspace directly above the ancient design. Initial explanations ranged from atmospheric ionization to instrument malfunction. The desert is known for temperature gradients that can bend radio signals, but this would not account for a total electrical blackout. Nor could it explain the pattern's confinement to a single sector of the plane. The equipment underwent full diagnostic testing afterward and showed no defects. Batteries, sensors, and cables remained intact. Data from secondary aircraft flying nearby revealed no corresponding interference. Whatever had caused the disturbance existed only above that ancient formation. The Nazca Plateau has long been suspected of containing traces of natural magnetism. Small iron deposits scattered in the desert soil can create weak anomalies, detectable only with sensitive instruments. Yet such minerals cannot generate the sudden, powerful field strength recorded during the blackout. When the data was sent to Lima for analysis, geophysicists confirmed that no seismic or atmospheric event had occurred within hundreds of kilometers that day. The blackout's pattern did not resemble a lightning discharge or a solar-induced geomagnetic storm. It was as if the air itself had momentarily carried an artificial current, one with no identifiable source. Archaeologists revisited earlier surveys taken decades apart. In the 1970s, a Soviet research team had conducted similar measurements and noted a faint rise in magnetism along certain lines, though not enough to cause interference. Their instruments, primitive by modern standards, could not detect short bursts. Had this same anomaly existed all along, hidden within the desert until contemporary sensors passed above it? As more details emerged, speculation grew. Some theorists proposed that the Nazca builders may have intentionally selected magnetically charged soil, enhancing visibility from above by removing darker oxidized layers. Others suggested that lightning strikes concentrated over centuries might have altered the ground's mineral structure. But no natural process could explain a phenomenon confined to a specific shape that briefly disrupted modern technology. Subsequent flights were arranged to replicate the event. Over the next 6 months, the same team conducted repeated passes using calibrated instruments, recording thousands of readings across different parts of the plateau. Not once did the blackout occur again. The data remained normal. The anomaly refused to return. It had appeared once, as if timed to reveal itself, then disappeared into silence. Local engineers offered one more hypothesis, that a buried metallic object, perhaps a remnant of wartime debris or an ancient meteorite, might have caused a localized field surge. To test this, a ground-penetrating radar survey was deployed across the coordinates. The results revealed nothing beneath the surface except the natural compacted clay and gravel that form the desert's crust. The soil was uniform, undisturbed, and free of any metallic content. Even more unsettling was a secondary observation made by the ground crew. While marking coordinates for surface verification, one technician reported a temporary failure of his handheld compass. The needle spun several times before locking north again. The incident lasted less than a second, too brief for documentation, but it occurred directly over the same trapezoid where the aircraft had experienced the blackout. Whether coincidence or continuity, it deepened the mystery. Scientists from the Peruvian Geophysical Institute reviewed all available data in the years that followed. None could explain the energy pattern. No radio transmission, satellite interference, or military testing matched the timing or coordinates. The desert remains one of the most electromagnetically stable regions on the continent. The absence of industry, power lines, or magnetic mines rules out human sources. The team's report concluded with a single unresolved classification: unidentified electromagnetic event. Today, researchers still study the Nazca lines, with a mixture of technological precision and quiet unease. The plateau continues to reveal traces of its creator's skill, geometric perfection across miles of empty earth, achieved without aerial guidance. Yet the blackout stands apart from history, an intrusion of the unexplainable upon the scientific. It left no trace, no visible scar, only a fragment of digital evidence in a silence that cannot be measured. In the desert, where the air never moves and the horizon blurs with heat, there are places where compasses hesitate and shadows seem to pause. The Nazca lines remain motionless, etched across centuries of wind and dust, but something unseen once stirred above them, a pulse that flickered into existence, disrupted the living instruments of science, and vanished as though retreating into time itself. Somewhere above the ancient markings, the sky remembers what the machines could not. The singing statues of Memnon. At sunrise over the Theban plain, the light moves slowly across 2 colossal figures seated on stone thrones, their surfaces cracked and faded by thousands of years of wind and sand. These are the colossi of Memnon, guardians of a vanished temple that once honoured Amenhotep III, pharaoh of Egypt's 18th dynasty. The statues rise more than 60 feet into the pale desert air, their faces long eroded, their hands resting upon their knees in eternal stillness. Yet for nearly 2,000 years these silent sentinels were said to sing. When travellers first approached the colossi after the great earthquake of 27 BCE, they heard what they could only describe as music. The northern statue, damaged by the quake, began to emit a strange tone at dawn, a soft metallic hum that rose into a clear flute-like vibration. It came without pattern or melody, vanishing as the day warmed. No instrument, no breeze, no bird could explain it. The sound appeared to come from within the stone itself. For generations it became one of the wonders of the ancient world. Ancient inscriptions speak of the phenomenon as if it were divine. Pilgrims from across the Mediterranean left carved testimonies on the legs and base of the colossus, recording the day and hour they heard its voice. They believed it to be Memnon, the mythical Ethiopian king slain by Achilles at Troy, greeting his mother, the dawn goddess Aos, as she rose each morning. The Greeks and Romans called the sound the voice of Memnon, a name that replaced the memory of the Egyptian pharaoh whose likeness the statue bore. Centuries later, Greek travellers like Strabo and Pausanias described their experiences with both awe and confusion. Strabo wrote that the sound resembled the breaking of a lyre string, while others compared it to the striking of bronze. Each account emphasised the same moment: the instant sunlight touched the statue's upper torso. The vibration was brief, lasting only seconds, yet clear enough to draw crowds at sunrise. The phenomenon continued for centuries, uniting strangers from distant lands in shared astonishment. The Roman Emperor Hadrian himself once stood before the statue in 130 CE, accompanied by his wife Sabina. According to surviving records, the sound manifested as the first light touched the stone. The emperor ordered an inscription carved into the base, commemorating what he had heard. Even after hundreds of years, the reports remained consistent. The tone came only in the morning, only from the damaged colossus, and only under calm skies. Then after one act of restoration, it ceased forever. Across centuries, attempts were made to recreate the voice after it fell silent, yet none succeeded. Priests built small shrines beside the statue, leaving offerings at dawn in hopes the sound would return. Roman engineers examined the figure's joints, believing hidden cavities or metal inlays might have amplified the sun's heat into resonance, but nothing unusual was found. Even Egyptian craftsmen of later dynasties avoided restoring the damaged upper body, claiming the voice had once belonged to a god who no longer wished to speak. The absence of proof did not quiet the belief that something inhuman had once moved within the stone. Modern archaeologists have searched for an explanation that could reconcile the legends with the laws of physics. When the Roman Emperor Septimius Severus ordered repairs to the cracked upper section in the late 2nd century CE, the statue was reassembled with blocks of sandstone and mortar. From that moment onward, the singing stopped. The silence that followed seemed as mysterious as the sound itself. The repairs had silenced a phenomenon that no one had understood, and in doing so, erased one of antiquity's strangest wonders. Acousticians proposed that the sound may have arisen from the rapid heating of dew, or condensed moisture trapped within the fractured stone at dawn. As the temperature rose, expanding air could have escaped through the cracks, producing a faint tone like a reed pipe. Others suggested piezoelectric effects caused by quartz crystals under tension in the stone. Some even pointed to the unique airflow patterns of the Theban plain, where the cool desert night met the rising warmth of morning. Each theory carried fragments of plausibility, yet none fit the recorded precision of the event. Yet none of these theories explain why the phenomenon continued without fail for nearly 2 centuries and stopped the instant repairs were completed. The area's climate has changed little over the millennia. The composition of the sandstone remains the same. Modern experiments attempting to replicate the sound using heat, vibration and moisture have all failed. The colossus no longer responds to the dawn, no matter the season or temperature. It remains mute, despite every effort to awaken it. The silence that followed the sound's final disappearance unsettled those who had come to depend on it as proof of divine presence. Thebes, once alive with the rhythm of priests and travellers, fell into gradual decline. The singing statue became a memory preserved only in inscriptions, the last note of an ancient melody lost to stone. In later centuries, when archaeologists uncovered those carved records, the uniformity of the accounts defied dismissal. The phenomenon was not a myth. It was witnessed by hundreds of people across generations. It had happened, and then it had stopped. Today the statues stand unchanged, overlooking the western bank of the Nile where the light of morning still floods the plain. The desert wind carries no sound but the faint hum of insects. The cracks that once gave voice to the stone are sealed, the edges softened by time. Tourists arrive at dawn, hoping to hear what emperors and poets once heard, but the air remains still. Instruments record nothing beyond the whisper of the breeze. The voice that spoke through stone has been absent for nearly 2,000 years. Perhaps the desert still waits for the voice to return, holding its breath each dawn as the first light touches the ancient stone. The vanishing footprints of Lehitali. A researcher kneels beside a shallow trench carved into the pale volcanic ash of northern Tanzania, where the soil holds an imprint older than human memory. The ground is soft from recent rain, and each brushstroke of the trowel reveals the faint outline of a bare foot pressed into the earth. nearly 4 million years ago. Beneath the afternoon sun, the scientist moves slowly, tracing the edges of what appears to be a step, though the depth is uneven and the surface strangely blurred, as if the ground itself resists being uncovered. Around the trench, flags mark the positions of dozens of other impressions, but several have begun to fade, not from time, but from something less visible. A vanishing that no one fully understands. Decades earlier, in the summer of 1978, a team led by Mary Leakey uncovered the original Laetoli footprints, a trail left by 3 early hominins walking across wet volcanic ash. Preserved by a thin layer of subsequent eruptions, the prints offered the earliest direct evidence of bipedal locomotion. They were astonishingly clear. Arches, toes, and stride lengths preserved as if the individuals had just walked away. Yet even then, Leakey noted peculiar distortions at the edges of the trackway, faint ripples that appeared and disappeared with changes in light. When she photographed them at dusk, several impressions visible by day could no longer be seen, their outlines swallowed by shadow, as though the ash remembered the feet only when the sun struck it at a certain angle. Protection came quickly after the discovery. The Tanzanian government sealed the most delicate sections beneath layers of soil to protect them from erosion and human interference. Years later, new excavations exposed adjacent prints, and for a brief moment, it seemed that the story of Laetoli had been preserved in full. But soon after the re-exposure, researchers noticed something unsettling. Some of the footprints began to lose their definition. The shapes softened. The fine ridges that marked toes and heels dissolved, even though the surrounding ash showed no signs of disturbance. No wind had blown the grains away, no rain had fallen, and yet the impressions seemed to flatten overnight, as if the surface had quietly rearranged itself. Even with modern equipment scanning every contour, the problem persists. High-resolution photogrammetry and laser mapping capture every millimetre of the remaining trackways, but each new survey reveals minute alterations. Measurements taken weeks apart do not match. Depth readings fluctuate in patterns too precise to be accidental. Some researchers have suggested microseismic activity, yet sensors detect no tremors. Others suspect chemical expansion or contraction of volcanic ash under shifting humidity, but laboratory simulations fail to reproduce the phenomenon. The ground appears to breathe, contracting, reshaping, and at times, erasing traces that had survived unbroken for millions of years. Photographs taken years apart revealed something strange beyond the slow fading. Entire sections of the path occasionally reappear, prints documented as lost return with perfect clarity, only to vanish again months later. In some cases, the shape changes direction, suggesting a different gate altogether. The alterations defy both geological and environmental logic. Satellite imagery has shown subtle shifts in surface reflectivity around the footprints, as if the soil's structure reorganizes at a molecular level. A few studies have proposed that mineralogical realignment under alternating moisture and temperature conditions could create the illusion of movement, yet this fails to explain why only the ancient prints and not the surrounding ground are affected. Some scientists argued that the explanation was simple: human error. They claimed that photographic distortion, lighting angles, or even subconscious expectation caused observers to perceive changes that were not truly there. But this rational view faltered when multiple independent teams reported identical variations under identical conditions. In one documented instance, an entire row of impressions photographed by an automated drone disappeared from the dataset the following day, though the coordinates were unchanged. The instruments themselves had recorded nothing but a smooth expanse of grey ash. For a site so meticulously studied, Laetoli continues to challenge the assumption that observation alone can secure reality. To the people who live near Laetoli, the footprints have always belonged to a deeper story. Elders from the Maasai communities speak of the ash plain as a place where the earth remembers and forgets at will. They say that what lies beneath the dust is not just evidence of the past, but a conversation between the ground and the sky, one that humans are not meant to interrupt. When researchers first arrived, villagers warned them that the soil could shift if disturbed, not by weather, but by something within it that listens. These words were often dismissed as folklore, yet the growing list of anomalies has revived interest in what local belief might conceal beneath metaphor. At dusk, when the field teams finish their work, the plains turn gold and the air cools to silence. The wind moves gently across the site, carrying the scent of dry grass and distant rain. Under the fading light, the footprints seem almost alive, faint depressions that shimmer and soften as the shadows lengthen. Some researchers linger after dark, watching the surface until it is swallowed by night, hoping to witness what the instruments cannot record. In the quiet, the ancient trail appears to fade from existence, leaving only the flat, unmarked ash. And when morning comes, there is no certainty of what will remain. No tool can hold the shape of that journey, for the earth erases what it once chose to reveal. The unexplained glow in the Great Pyramid. The air inside the King's Chamber feels different from the corridors that lead to it. Heavier, drier, carrying the faint metallic tang of ancient stone. The walls are built from blocks so precisely fitted that not even a blade can slip between them. The granite hums with stillness, its silence broken only by the sound of distant instruments and human breath echoing through narrow passages. Every surface reflects the faint light of the researchers' headlamps, yet even in that artificial illumination, there lingers a deeper kind of brightness, one that seems to come from the stone itself. Weeks of measurement had produced nothing unusual. The research team had been cataloguing temperature gradients, air pressure shifts, and magnetic fluctuations as part of a long-term conservation project. Sensors placed in the chamber recorded data night and day, while light intensity meters confirmed what centuries of study already knew. The pyramid was a tomb of shadow. But after several nights of continuous monitoring, one instrument began registering faint luminescent activity. It appeared briefly, without a clear source, before vanishing into the still air. The readings were weak but consistent, and when recalibrated, the instruments detected the same anomaly again, always at the same hour, long after the lights had been turned off. It was during one of the late-night calibrations that the anomaly appeared. The team had evacuated the chamber for the night, leaving only remote sensors running. At exactly 2:17 a.m., a low-level glow filled the upper portion of the western wall, lasting less than a minute. Cameras recorded a gradient of soft golden light that did not behave like reflection or static discharge. It formed in a curved pattern, resembling a crescent or wave, and faded without motion. When the team returned in the morning, there was no trace of chemical residue or heat signature on the stone. The instruments had captured measurable photons, but the source was untraceable. The light was not bright, yet it possessed a strange consistency. It lacked the flicker of electricity or the pulse of plasma. Some described it as phosphorescent, though no known mineral within the granite could emit such energy spontaneously. The faint illumination seemed to hover inside the stone rather than on its surface. It neither cast shadows nor reacted to touch. Those who witnessed it in person said it felt both near and distant, as though the pyramid itself was quietly alive, responding to some invisible rhythm. The faint glow never appeared when expected, only in silence, and only when no one was watching directly. Attempts to reproduce the glow under laboratory conditions failed. Samples taken from the same granite used in the King's Chamber showed no unusual luminescent properties. When subjected to radiation, vibration and heat cycles, they remained inert. Researchers tested for microbial phosphorescence and natural ionization caused by air friction, but results were negative. The equipment was replaced and new experiments were installed, yet the readings continued. Over time, the pattern became more distinct. The glow occurred at irregular intervals, but always aligned with moments of lowest ambient sound inside the pyramid. Some physicists proposed that the phenomenon might be electrical, a form of piezoelectric discharge triggered by the immense pressure of the granite blocks. Others speculated that trapped gas or trace radiation from the rock's natural uranium content could be interacting with quartz crystals under certain atmospheric conditions. But none of these hypotheses could explain the periodic timing or why the glow appeared only in one section of the chamber. When researchers attempted to stimulate the same effect artificially, the energy readings remained flat. The anomaly responded to nothing measurable, yet persisted in defiance of every explanation. Beneath the surface explanations, an unease began to spread among the team. Some felt that the phenomenon behaved almost intelligently, manifesting only when instruments were not directly observing it. Several nights, when the cameras failed due to battery depletion or interference, the glow returned, brighter and clearer than before. The air would grow warmer, and a faint vibration could be felt through the floor. A few researchers described hearing a low tone, like the resonance of metal under stress. When the lights were turned on, the sound vanished, and the stone stood dark and silent once more. The official reports avoided such details, referring instead to brief photoluminescent occurrences, but the unspoken sense of unease lingered. At night, when the equipment was silent and the chamber empty, the pyramid seemed to draw in the surrounding darkness. From the entrance passage, the air carried a slight shimmer, as though reflecting a hidden fire. Some guards stationed outside the chamber claimed to see the faintest golden haze moving through the air shafts, drifting upward toward the stars. The phenomenon never appeared beyond the pyramid's walls, and it left no trace on the sensors the next morning. Still, those who have spent long hours in the king's chamber describe an impression that refuses to fade, a feeling that the light remains unseen somewhere within the granite, waiting for the right moment to emerge again. Even now, despite decades of research, no one has determined the cause. The instruments continue to record minor fluctuations long after the glow itself has ceased to appear. The data defy pattern, temperature, and reason. Some claim the light is an illusion, born of fatigue and confinement. Others whisper that the pyramid, built with impossible precision and aligned perfectly to the stars, may still be conducting an energy older than memory. In the stillness of its heart, there lingers a brightness that refuses to belong to time. The Great Pyramid remains dark to the eye, yet deep within, the stone remembers how to shine. The sound illusions of Chavin de Huantar. In the heart of the Peruvian Andes, the temple complex of Chavin de Huantar stands carved from stone and shadow. It lies between the Mosna and Huachexa rivers, where the highland mist drifts through valleys once sacred to a civilization older than the Inca. Massive granite blocks form walls that descend into dark galleries, their surfaces marked by serpents, jaguars, and fanged deities. The air here is cool and still, yet there is a sense of vibration beneath the silence, as though something within the stone remembers the sound that once filled it. When the first explorers entered its inner corridors, the air seemed to vibrate. Narrow tunnels wound through the temple-like veins, their purpose unclear. The explorers spoke of echoes that behaved unnaturally, returning not as reflections of footsteps or voices, but as layered tones that seemed alive. A whisper could twist into a low hum, a call could fade into a resonance that lingered after the sound had ceased. The architecture, built around intersecting galleries and shafts, appeared to shape the very behaviour of sound. Sound behaved differently here. In the labyrinthine heart of the complex, the resonance could grow so intense that it felt physical. Some reported a low pulsing rhythm that seemed to move through the body rather than the air. The gallery's stone walls, set at calculated angles, amplified frequencies in ways that defied ordinary acoustics. What should have been silence instead became a presence, invisible, pervasive, and impossible to ignore. Engineers studying the structure decades later noticed something astonishing. When low-frequency tones were introduced into the tunnels, they bounced and merged in unpredictable patterns, producing interference waves that seemed to shift location. Microphones placed at different points registered sounds that did not exist elsewhere in the structure, as if the stone itself were shaping new tones. The result was an auditory illusion. One could hear a sound that was not being made or sense movement in what was still air. Later studies revealed that many of the temple's air shafts and drainage canals were deliberately carved with slight asymmetries. These imperfections, once thought to be mere erosion, now appear deliberate, each one influencing how air and sound moved through the stone. When wind passed through at certain speeds, the channels produced faint tonal vibrations similar to those recorded during acoustic tests. It suggested that the temple might not have needed instruments or voices to awaken. The mountain itself could have breathed through its walls. Low frequencies carried through the channels like voices moving through water. A single note could travel from one chamber to another and arrive transformed, stretched, or split into harmonic layers. Even footsteps produced strange effects, echoing as rhythmic patterns that felt deliberate. The temple's central gallery, where a towering carved monolith, known as the Lanzon, rises from the floor, acted as a resonant chamber. Standing before it, sound gathers into an enveloping vibration that obscures its source, creating the uncanny impression that the stone itself is speaking. To those who have stood inside the galleries, the sensation borders on the supernatural. Archaeologists describe the experience as disorienting, a confusion of direction and perception that makes it impossible to tell where one stands. Voices blur into tones, and the mind struggles to separate external sound from internal pulse. Some visitors have likened it to being inside a living instrument, one tuned to evoke fear and awe in equal measure. The builders of Chavin seem to understand how to use sound not as ornament, but as a tool of transformation. Early records and carvings suggest that sound held sacred significance to the Chavin priests. Reliefs depict figures blowing into conch shells, instruments known as pututus, whose deep resonant tones could fill the subterranean passages. These conch shells, when played within the temple, produced frequencies that interacted with the architecture's geometry, amplifying their effects. The imagery carved into the walls, serpents coiling, feline jaws open in perpetual roar, mirrored the auditory chaos of ritual. Sound, image, and stone worked together to create an atmosphere of controlled terror, perhaps meant to signify communication with the divine. Others believe that rituals performed in the temple were designed to induce altered states of awareness. The interplay of light, echo, and vibration could overwhelm the senses, dissolving the boundary between the physical and the spiritual. Priests may have used the acoustic effects to convince initiates they were hearing the voices of gods. Coupled with hallucinogenic substances known to have been used in Chavin culture, the sensory manipulation could have created profound experiences of revelation, or fear. In these underground corridors, belief was not spoken, it was heard, felt, and endured. Today, experiments continue to reveal new acoustic patterns in its chambers. Researchers using digital mapping have identified standing waves that remain stable at specific frequencies, suggesting intentional design. The same properties that once produced awe still occur, measurable by modern instruments, but no less uncanny to human perception. Yet no one fully understands how builders more than 2,000 years ago achieved such precision using only stone and intuition. The site remains both a temple and an enigma, a place where sound defies logic and time alike. Somewhere within the stone corridors, a faint vibration persists, waiting for a voice that knows how to wake it. The selective burn at Hattusa. The first signs of irregular burning were noticed in the colour of the walls, streaks of vitrified stone running like veins beneath centuries of dust. Archaeologists at the site of Hattusa, the once thriving capital of the Hittite Empire, expected traces of ordinary destruction, collapsed roofs, ash layers, and the evidence of looting that accompanies most ancient ruins. But what they found instead was a pattern of damage so specific that it defied the logic of fire. Some walls had melted into glass, while others, built from the same stone and standing beside them, remained untouched. The city appeared to have been burned selectively, as though the flames had obeyed invisible boundaries drawn long before they were lit. Samples taken from the affected areas revealed temperatures no ancient furnace could reach. In the laboratories of Ankara and Berlin, mineralogists noted fused quartz and partially liquefied basalt, materials that only begin to deform under heat exceeding 1,000 degrees Celsius. Such intensity could not have been produced by torches, siege fires, or even the sustained inferno of a wooden structure burning against stone, yet the evidence was there, preserved in crystalline scars that seemed almost deliberate. The ruins did not simply record a tragedy, they documented a phenomenon that science could describe but not explain. What puzzled investigators most was the precision. The burn zones formed narrow bands, some no wider than a corridor, extending through doorways and stopping abruptly at thresholds. In one residential district, pottery and tablets lay blackened to charcoal on one side of a wall, while the opposite surface bore no discoloration at all. It was as if the heat had respected the geometry of the city. The absence of randomness made the event harder to dismiss as natural. Fire is chaotic by nature, yet here it appeared to have been guided. Elsewhere in the city, walls of identical stone stood unmarked. Excavations around the royal citadel revealed sections preserved so perfectly that pigments of mural paint remained visible on plaster. The contrast between scorched and untouched surfaces deepened the mystery, suggesting a process that had targeted specific sectors. Some scholars proposed that the fires were symbolic, that temples and palaces might have been intentionally burned during ritual closure after Hattusa's fall. But no traces of controlled burning rituals existed in Hittite records, and no soot layering pattern matched the behaviour of torches or oil. The burn had come suddenly, violently, and with precision. In the surviving Hittite tablets, there are references to fire as both punishment and renewal. In their mythology, the gods wielded flame to purify cities and avenge betrayal. The high priest wrote of offerings made to the consuming light, invoking divine power to cleanse corruption. To them, destruction and devotion could intertwine, leaving no boundary between prayer and annihilation. Such beliefs have led some historians to consider whether the final days of Hattusa might have witnessed a ritual gone beyond human control, an act of worship that ended in devastation. For the Hittites, flames carried divine authority, the instrument of gods rather than men. Sacred fires burned constantly in their sanctuaries, fed by priests who guarded them through night and storm. But the burn at Hattusa bore no resemblance to those controlled, reverent flames. This was fire stripped of ritual and purpose, leaving only geometry and silence behind. It was not a symbol of power, but a trace of something unleashed. When researchers revisited Hattusa in the mid-20th century, the enigma deepened. New excavations exposed deeper strata of destruction, showing that the selective burns penetrated multiple layers of occupation. The oldest levels, untouched by any recorded invasion, displayed the same strange vitrification. That discovery complicated the timeline. Either the event had recurred over centuries, or the source of heat had been powerful enough to reach far below the surface. Neither explanation sat comfortably with conventional archaeology. Spectrographic tests showed rapid heating and cooling, impossible for a natural blaze. The data implied that the heat source had flared and vanished within moments, leaving surfaces molten but foundations intact. There were no signs of accelerants, no residue of oil or resin, no carbonized timber to explain the energy release. When modelled on modern computers, the pattern resembled the effect of a concentrated thermal pulse, a burst of heat that expanded and then ceased before spreading beyond its path. But such technology, of course, did not exist in the Late Bronze Age. During later fieldwork, ground-penetrating radar revealed faint traces of subsurface magnetization beneath the burned sectors. These anomalies, detected in narrow bands consistent with the scorch zones above, indicated that the event had affected not only the stone but also the soil's magnetic alignment. Similar signatures have been documented only at sites exposed to intense electromagnetic surges, a phenomenon still unexplained in pre-industrial contexts. Whatever produced the heat at Hattusa seemed to have briefly altered the Earth itself, leaving behind an invisible echo of energy frozen beneath the ruins. Theories multiplied, from lightning storms to weaponized fire, yet none accounted for the selectivity. Lightning strikes leave radial scars, not corridor-shaped burns. War leaves chaos, not symmetry. Some fringe proposals invoked cosmic explanations, suggesting that a meteor's plasma burst might have brushed the site. Others speculated on seismic gas ignition or subterranean venting, though no geological evidence supported those claims. With every failed hypothesis, the fire at Hattusa slipped further from history into the realm of enigma. In the end, what remained was a pattern of heat and absence, as if intention itself had chosen its path. The walls stand silent beneath the Anatolian sun, their surfaces still holding the faint sheen of what once flowed like liquid stone. No record describes the night it happened, and no witness lived to tell of the glow that reshaped the city. All that endures are the markings of an intelligence that spoke through flame and then withdrew. A silence still lingers over the scorched stones, as though the fire is waiting to speak again. The shifting megaliths of Baalbek. The colossal stones of Baalbek lie fixed against the mountains of Lebanon, each weighing hundreds of tons, their surfaces carved and aligned, as if time itself had been commanded to stand still. The great terrace forming the base of the Temple of Jupiter has survived earthquakes, invasions, and centuries of neglect. Yet among the engineers and archaeologists who have studied it, there persists an unease, the suspicion that something in this mountain of stone has not always remained as immovable as it seems. Long before advanced instruments, workers at the nearby quarry noticed something odd. The largest block ever cut, known as the Stone of the Pregnant Woman, appeared slightly repositioned each time the area was cleared of debris. Measurements taken decades apart revealed a shift of several centimeters, though no cracks or displacement lines were visible beneath it. Legends grew that the stone turned during the night, inching imperceptibly toward the Great Terrace as if seeking reunion with the walls above. For generations, locals avoided the site after dark, saying that the earth there breathed with a soundless rhythm. Centuries later, geodetic surveys would confirm what legend had quietly suggested. Using high-resolution satellite mapping and ground sensors, researchers compared modern coordinates with the earliest French expedition records from the 19th century. The data revealed microscopic changes in alignment among several foundation stones, some appearing to have shifted less than a millimetre per year. Such motion might seem insignificant, yet these blocks each weigh upwards of 800 tons. No known environmental process could move them without leaving evidence of upheaval. Each block rests with impossible precision upon the next. The joins are so fine that a sheet of paper cannot slip between them, the faces carved to fit perfectly, even along uneven terrain. Engineers note that the stones appear pre-stressed, as though placed under compression to maintain balance. If any piece had moved, however slightly, the structure's symmetry would have failed long ago. Yet laser scans show subtle inconsistencies between historical photographs and current measurements. It is as though the platform adjusts itself over time, preserving equilibrium through an invisible design. The quarry itself tells another story. Deep within its pit lies an unfinished monolith known as the Stone of the South, weighing more than 1,000 tons. In 2014, archaeologists discovered a second, even larger stone beneath it, one that had never been fully uncovered. Despite being buried for millennia, its upper edge showed faint abrasions, as if rubbed by friction from above. These traces imply contact or vibration at some point after burial, a detail that contradicts its supposed immobility. Something within the bedrock of Baalbek seems to respond to forces still not understood. Seismologists studying the region found the ground remarkably stable. Though Lebanon lies near active fault lines, the Baalbek Plateau experiences minimal tremors. Over centuries, the site has endured less geological disturbance than nearby settlements. The measured consistency of soil strata beneath the terrace disproves the notion of gradual subsidence or tectonic drift. If the megaliths have moved, their motion has not come from the shifting earth. It is an anomaly that isolates the site from natural explanation and deepens the question of its construction. Yet, within that stillness, instruments detected an impossible truth. A team from the University of Heidelberg installed microseismic sensors across the terrace to monitor vibration levels. Over several months, they recorded rhythmic pulses too low for human hearing, repeating at intervals that coincided with shifts in atmospheric pressure. These pulses produced faint resonance in the stone, detectable only through sensitive accelerometers. When charted, the data formed patterns resembling oscillations, not random tremors, but recurring sequences as if the megaliths were subtly responding to environmental frequencies. Some researchers proposed that harmonic resonance could be at work. The limestone of Baalbek contains a mixture of crystalline inclusions, capable of transmitting sound efficiently. Under specific conditions, such materials can amplify micro-vibrations. One hypothesis suggests that the terrace may act as a resonant chamber, with the massive blocks behaving like tuning forks set into the earth. Yet this theory fails to explain the directionality of the observed movement, nor how the blocks realign over time without structural stress. If resonance alone were responsible, fractures would have formed, but none exist. Others point to the precision of ancient engineering. The builders of Baalbek appear to have calculated load distribution to an extent unmatched until modern times. Some believe that the stones were designed to breathe with temperature changes, expanding and contracting fractionally through the day, their combined weight allowing minuscule adjustments to maintain balance. If so, this system operates far beyond recorded human understanding. The ancient craftsmen would have needed not only architectural genius, but also a predictive sense of material behavior across centuries. The question extends beyond engineering. Throughout history, the site has been revered as a point of alignment between heaven and earth. Roman, Greek, and earlier Semitic traditions considered it sacred long before the Temple of Jupiter was built. Inscriptions speak of light descending upon the stones during equinox dawns, a moment when the terrace seems to catch the sun in perfect balance. Some argue that whatever phenomenon causes the movement may be tied to these celestial alignments. A cosmic rhythm echoed in stone, still faintly alive beneath the surface. At twilight, the site returns to silence. The stones cool as the air thickens with the scent of dust and cedar. Tourists depart, leaving the terrace to the mountain and the stars. Beneath the stillness, instruments continue their vigil, measuring, listening, waiting for a motion that no one can feel. The night conceals what daylight reveals, that even the oldest stones might not be at rest. A single breath of wind passes over the terrace, and for an instant it feels as though the mountain itself shifts below the weight of its own memory. The shadow disappearance at Angkor Wat. Under a colourless dawn, the stones of Angkor Wat appear as though they exhale light rather than absorb it. The long colonnades carved with endless processions of deities and warriors should throw deep shadows when the sun rises behind the eastern towers. Yet, at certain moments in the dry season, the expected darkness fails to appear. Reliefs that ought to hold sharp contrast between sunlit plains and recessed figures remain strangely uniform, their depth erased as if the carvings have been pressed flat beneath a thin veil of brightness. What remains is not the illusion of light, but the absence of it, an entire surface emptied of dimension. Carved alignments across the causeway reveal a precision that borders on impossible. The temple's vast geometry, arranged along the axis of the rising sun at the spring equinox, seems designed to control every degree of illumination. Scholars have long admired its engineering, yet the vanishing of shadow across specific courtyards resists architectural explanation. The stones reflect with a diffused shimmer, as though coated in translucent dust, their outlines softened until depth itself dissolves. Some suggest that the sandstone's crystalline quality scatters light just enough to neutralize darkness, creating a momentary equilibrium between brilliance and void. Notations in early field journals speak of the same anomaly. French explorers in the 1860s recorded mornings when the temple lost its contrast, claiming that its towers looked painted onto the sky. Restoration photographers decades later encountered similar results, negatives showing blank walls where sculpted recesses should have caught darkness. These were dismissed as exposure errors, yet the pattern persisted across film types, seasons, and angles. To those who compared the prints by hand, the effect was not merely visual. It suggested that something physical in the light had been altered, as though the spectrum itself had thinned. Later surveys conducted during UNESCO's 20th century restoration project noted similar irregularities. Technicians measuring solar reflection on the temple's facade observed sudden spikes in luminosity readings, despite steady atmospheric conditions. Some of the sensors temporarily failed to register contrast at all, recording the stone surface as a single uninterrupted tone. It was as if the temple's outer walls absorbed every shadow cast upon them, holding the light in suspension rather than reflecting it outward. The data remained inconclusive, but several researchers privately admitted that the readings seemed to coincide with days near the equinox, suggesting a deliberate alignment beyond simple symmetry. Measurements of illumination taken by conservation teams in recent years offer little clarity. Instruments detect no abnormal intensity in the sunlight, and yet cameras continue to record flattened surfaces when aimed towards certain corridors at specific hours. Moisture content in the air, variations in dust, and reflectivity of the ancient sandstone have all been considered. None adequately accounts for the precision of the effect, the sudden onset and equally abrupt disappearance of the shadowless state. At times it lasts only seconds, at others nearly an hour, vanishing again with no discernible pattern. Local interpreters of the temple's lore describe the event differently. In their telling, the loss of shadow is a form of surrender, a gesture of devotion to the celestial order. They recall stories of the lightless gate, a portal said to appear when the earth aligns perfectly with the sun spirit. In those moments, they say, the carvings awaken, not through movement but through withdrawal. The figures yield their form to the radiance that birthed them. Such myths, far from superstition, reveal how deeply Angkor's builders may have understood the interplay between architecture, time, and cosmic rhythm. Observers today describe the same phenomena with modern astonishment. Tourists filming the temple often notice that parts of their footage appear unreal, as if the camera had momentarily failed to perceive depth. In some videos, human figures crossing the courtyard cast no shadow at all, while others in the same frame retain theirs. Lighting experts analysing the clips conclude that the absence cannot be explained by simple reflection or lens error. The implication is unsettling, that the temple does not reflect light uniformly, but selectively, responding to unseen variables in the observer's position or in the hour's precise alignment. To those studying its geometry, the effect mirrors the Khmer cosmology it was meant to embody. Angkor Wat is not merely a structure, but a map of existence, its galleries representing the universe's concentric layers. The disappearance of shadow, then, might symbolize the brief moment when form ceases to distinguish itself from essence, when matter, light and consciousness become indistinguishable. Whether intentional or accidental, the phenomenon turns architecture into philosophy, transforming stone into an instrument of perception itself. Another interpretation views the event through the lens of ancient ritual. Archaeologists have uncovered traces of polished metal fragments embedded within certain inner corridors, possibly remnants of ceremonial mirrors. If the builders employed reflective surfaces to amplify or redirect light, it could mean that the shadowless effect was once part of a controlled visual performance, an enactment of divine revelation within the temple's heart. Yet no records confirm such practice, and the few surviving inscriptions describing the merging of form and sky remain too fragmented to decode. Between every explanation, scientific, symbolic, or sacred, remains a silence that no measurement can fill. The temple endures, its stones marked by time yet capable of defying its logic, holding the paradox of a surface that shines without light and depths that vanish into radiance. Some shadows, it seems, were never meant to return, lingering instead in the quiet brilliance that the temple still refuses to explain. The metallic liquid beneath Teotihuacan. The first shaft opened into darkness, colder than the air above the Valley of Mexico. Archaeologists descended slowly through a narrow passage carved into the ancient earth, their footsteps echoing against the stone walls. For nearly 2,000 years, the tunnels below Teotihuacan had remained sealed, hidden beneath the weight of a forgotten city. Dust rose in the beams of their lamps, and every sound seemed swallowed by the depth, as though the ground itself resisted being disturbed. What they were about to find would challenge not only their understanding of the city, but the limits of ancient craftsmanship itself. As the excavation lights flickered on, the passage walls glimmered faintly. Fine flecks of mica embedded in the stone caught the artificial light, scattering it into shimmering reflections that seemed almost fluid. The surface appeared unnaturally smooth, as if the tunnel had been deliberately polished to guide movement toward its end. No tool marks were visible, only an impression of precision, of a geometry far too exact for a structure buried in darkness. The deeper the team advanced, the more the light bent and wavered, as though the walls themselves breathed with metallic life. The floor sloped downward for nearly 100 meters, lined with smooth stone blocks cut so tightly that no mortar was needed between them. The air grew dense with the scent of damp earth and minerals, an aroma that clung to clothing long after emerging from the shaft. The tunnel curved gently, then straightened, its walls narrowing to a single-pointed corridor that seemed designed to draw the eye and the body towards something waiting below. For those first explorers, the descent felt less like entering a ruin than stepping into an engineered labyrinth of ritual and control. Halfway through the tunnel, fragments of pottery and jade began to appear. They lay scattered as though placed deliberately, not lost or discarded. Figurines, shells, and beads of pyrite reflected the lamplight in tiny flashes. Some items had been positioned along a straight axis, pointing deeper into the passage. Others were arranged in patterns resembling constellations, as if the floor were a map of stars. The placement defied randomness. It felt ceremonial, a guided path to a hidden purpose that had remained sealed for nearly 2 millennia. Then, under the final chamber, the liquid was found. The archaeologists first saw it as a faint glimmer on the ground, a reflective sheen that appeared solid until the light moved. Beneath the floor, in a cavity lined with mineral deposits, a silvery pool stretched across the chamber's width. It was not water. Its surface shimmered with a metallic hue that seemed alive, quivering with every breath of air. The substance neither hardened nor evaporated, its motion unnervingly slow and deliberate. It was mercury, but in quantities that no ancient culture was thought capable of refining or storing. Tests confirmed the substance was metallic but not molten. Laboratory results revealed traces of pure elemental mercury mixed with other compounds that resisted classification. It should not have remained liquid after so many centuries underground. Yet here it was, unstained by oxidation, untouched by decay. The concentration suggested deliberate extraction, heating and containment, a level of metallurgical sophistication not supported by any known technology of pre-Columbian Mesoamerica. Each sample raised more questions than it answered, each test peeling back another layer of impossibility. What unsettled researchers most was its behavior under light. When illuminated, the metallic surface rippled with faint vibrations, forming shifting concentric circles that seemed to respond to movement and sound. Instruments recorded electromagnetic interference within the chamber, subtle but measurable. Some theorists proposed that the mercury may have been used to amplify sound or reflect torchlight during rituals, creating illusions of motion and brilliance. Others whispered of energy fields and lost sciences, though such claims found no footing in the data. Still, the effect was undeniable. The liquid seemed aware of the world around it. The tunnel's alignment added another layer of intrigue. Surveyors found it pointed directly toward the pyramid of the feathered serpent above, the structure believed to have served as a ceremonial heart of Teotihuacan. The positioning was deliberate, its axis running true to the cardinal points. It was as if the entire complex had been engineered to focus light, water, and metal in one continuous design. Some archaeologists speculated that the mercury could have represented an underworld river, a symbolic mirror of the heavens reflected in liquid metal. Yet, if it was symbolic, it was executed with a precision that defied ordinary devotion. Further studies uncovered residues of magnetite, pyrite, and hematite embedded in the tunnel walls, materials known for their reflective and magnetic properties. The combination suggested that the builders understood not only the visual power of light and reflection, but also the potential to manipulate natural forces. No inscriptions revealed their methods or intentions. The city itself, abandoned centuries before the Aztecs arrived, offered only silence. They called it the place where gods were made, as if even they sensed that the architecture belonged to something far older and perhaps far stranger than their own traditions. To this day, the find raises more questions than answers. Mercury has appeared at other Mesoamerican sites, but never in such vast, deliberate form, never in a chamber so carefully hidden. Scientists continue to study the samples, but the source of the metal remains unknown. It should have dissipated or crystallized long ago, yet it remains fluid, sealed in a darkness no sunlight has touched since before the Roman Empire rose. Each expedition returns with data but without clarity, for the more the chamber is measured, the less it yields to reason. Far below the pyramid, a silent river of metal still waits, untouched and glimmering in perpetual night. The acoustic phenomenon of Stonehenge. The initial note suspended itself in the air, lasting longer than anticipated. Researchers had struck a wooden mallet against a sarsen stone, intending only to measure the echo within the circle. Instead, the sound lingered, twisting and folding back upon itself in ways that defied simple reflection. Each reverberation seemed to take on a different character, a low hum in one spot, a subtle harmonic in another, as though the monument itself had absorbed the energy and reshaped it. The open plain around the stones appeared almost to lean in, as if the air itself had been drawn into the resonance. Those standing nearby felt a subtle vibration under their feet, a reminder that this was no ordinary ruin. When the tone finally dissipated, it did not vanish, it shifted. A second strike produced a different pattern, yet the same stones responded predictably, almost knowingly. Acoustic sensors revealed standing waves forming between massive megaliths, their geometry creating pockets of sound that amplified and distorted the original vibration. In some areas, the sound became sharper, bouncing in unexpected directions, creating disorienting effects for both ear and mind. The researchers, initially skeptical, noted a strange harmony that seemed almost intentional, as though the circle had been crafted not only for sight but for hearing. On misty mornings, the stones seemed to carry the sound farther than physics allows. Researchers observed that humidity, air temperature, and even slight shifts in wind direction subtly altered the resonance, making certain notes linger or change pitch unexpectedly. A damp dawn could turn a simple strike into a prolonged vibrating hum, while a dry afternoon produced sharper, more brittle tones. These variations hint at a careful awareness of natural conditions, suggesting that the builders may have chosen specific seasons, times of day, or weather patterns to heighten the auditory impact of their rituals. Long before instruments or speakers, the same phenomenon must have filled the ancient air. Anthropologists suggest that the builders understood how the sarsen's and bluestones would conduct vibration. Rituals may have been designed with the knowledge that chants, drums, or other vocalizations would reverberate across the circle, creating a shared sensory experience. Participants may have coordinated their movements, shifting weight and voice to interact with the acoustic environment. The ground itself would have seemed to hum beneath the feet of those present, turning each ceremony into an immersive performance of architecture and sound, binding body, voice, and stone in a single living resonance. Excavations near the outer ring uncovered evidence of repeated gatherings. Charred wood fragments, fragments of bone, and small carved objects pointed to ceremonial activities occurring in precise patterns. Some stones bore subtle grooves, possibly caused by repeated percussion or ritual contact. The placement of smaller stones suggested a deliberate arrangement to channel sound or create echo points within the circle. These traces hint at intentional manipulation of the acoustic environment, a design that merged human activity and structural resonance in ways modern researchers can only partially reproduce. To reproduce the effect, researchers built an exact acoustic model of the inner circle. In controlled settings, artificial waves of sound produced the same eerie harmonics observed on site. Sensors captured anomalies where the frequency would spike unpredictably, creating pockets of resonance that defied conventional physics. Volunteers reported vibrations moving along their bodies, low hums that seemed to linger in the chest and throat. Even when replicated, the effect retained a peculiar quality. Subtle variations emerged depending on the position of observers or the precise timing of strikes. Stonehenge, it seemed, was both predictable and capricious, a living instrument shaped by stone, space, and time. Outside the stones, the sound dies quickly. Inside, it folds back upon itself. Windswept plains and open fields surrounding the monument absorb and scatter noise. Yet within the circle, echoes seem to resist dissipation. Voices carried along certain alignments became clearer and louder, amplified without any visible mechanism. Acoustic modelling shows that the inner space can focus sound like a lens, concentrating energy in pockets where multiple stones converge. Visitors report sensations of sound surrounding them, as if the stones themselves were speaking, their vibrations forming a presence that cannot be seen but can be felt. Listeners report sensations that go beyond sound, a pressure in the chest, and a tingling along the spine, as if the vibration of the stones were reaching into the body itself. Volunteers experimenting inside the circle describe a sense of disorientation, a subtle vertigo, or fleeting shivers that cannot be explained by the environment alone. Some researchers speculate that these effects could have contributed to the monument's sacred reputation, turning an architectural arrangement into a transformative space where sound, perception, and consciousness converge. The stones, in effect, become instruments not just of echo but of human experience. Certain theories hold that the monument was never devoid of sound. Even in periods of abandonment, the stones retained their potential to shape and transmit vibration. Historical folklore speaks of gatherings at Stonehenge where participants would sing, drum, or chant to invoke the attention of unseen forces. Accounts suggest that the monument's acoustic properties were known to those who erected it, carefully exploited to enhance ritual and perception. Each note, each echo would have reinforced the experience of sacred presence, making the stone circle both a temple and an instrument, a place where human intention and geological material converge. The legacy of sound at Stonehenge persists in measurements, stories, and lingering curiosity, yet no definitive explanation satisfies the mystery of its acoustics. Even as the sun rises over the Salisbury Plain and tourists wander the pathways, some portions of the monument remain sonically active, a hidden dimension that only emerges under precise conditions. Each visitor becomes both witness and participant, unaware of how the circle continues to shape perception and echo memory. Stonehenge holds more than shadows and history. It cradles the invisible language of vibration, a resonance waiting to speak to those who listen closely enough. The blinding flash at Gobekli Tepe. Gobekli Tepe, perched atop a ridge in southeastern Turkey, has long fascinated archaeologists with its enormous T-shaped pillars and intricately carved reliefs. The site, predating Stonehenge by several millennia, holds the remains of a civilization whose rituals and intentions remain largely enigmatic. excavations had revealed massive enclosures, some arranged in circles and others forming elongated structures, each adorned with depictions of animals, abstract symbols, and what some interpreted as celestial markers. Scholars have debated for decades whether these constructions were purely ceremonial, astronomical, or part of a broader cultural landscape that stretched across the region. The attention of the archaeological community shifted in the late 2010s, when a team conducting geophysical surveys uncovered an event that defied conventional explanation. The team had been using ground-penetrating radar to map subsurface features without disturbing the fragile site. It was a quiet afternoon, the sun low over the Anatolian plains, and the surveyors were tracing the outlines of circular enclosures that had yet to be fully excavated. The instruments hummed steadily, producing familiar graphs of the stone foundations and compacted earth beneath the surface. Then, without warning, the radar equipment recorded a sudden and intense spike. Screens across the laboratory and the field vehicles lit up with readings unlike any previously observed. Simultaneously, high-sensitivity photodetectors set up to monitor the sky above the site registered a burst of light so bright that it saturated the sensors, appearing as a sudden flare across multiple independent devices. The recorded burst did not coincide with any electrical activity, either locally or regionally. Power lines in the vicinity showed no fluctuations, and portable generators used for excavation work were operating normally. The photodetectors were shielded from stray sunlight and reflections, and tests immediately afterward confirmed that no calibration error could have produced the anomalous signal. The phenomenon lasted only a fraction of a second, but the intensity of the recorded light suggested an energy release far beyond what one might expect from natural luminescence in a dry Anatolian field. Researchers found themselves confronting a paradox. Instruments designed to detect underground voids, water channels, and structural anomalies had recorded a radiant event with no apparent source. Eyewitness accounts from team members offered no immediate clarity. Some reported a flash that seemed to originate from beneath the ground, a brief illumination of the surrounding stone pillars. Others felt a sudden warmth on their skin, fleeting but vivid, while a few described a low, almost imperceptible vibration that accompanied the light. No one saw fire, smoke, or electrical arcs, yet the instruments were unanimous in recording a high-intensity emission. The moment passed as quickly as it had arrived, leaving only a faint hum in the equipment and a sense of unease among the observers. Preliminary reviews of the radar traces revealed unusual reflections, as if a cavity or structure had momentarily unexpectedly interacted with energy. Speculation arose immediately within the team and the broader archaeological community. Some suggested that piezoelectric effects from the quartz-rich bedrock could produce light when subjected to stress. However, the surrounding stones showed no signs of cracking or mechanical strain, and comparable tests in nearby terrain failed to replicate the phenomenon. Others considered atmospheric explanations such as rare electrical discharges or ionization events in the lower atmosphere. Yet meteorological records for that afternoon indicated clear skies, minimal wind, and no evidence of lightning or other natural phenomena capable of producing such a sudden flare. A detailed review of satellite and geomagnetic data failed to reveal anything concurrent with the flash. The anomaly prompted an exhaustive re-examination of the instruments. Engineers recalibrated the photodetectors, replaced radar units, and conducted controlled tests in the same enclosures. Each time, the equipment performed flawlessly under normal conditions, yet the original readings remained irreproducible. Digital logs from the day showed the exact moment the light spike occurred, a time-stamped record that could not be dismissed as a recording error. The precision of the instruments, combined with the lack of any detectable external cause, positioned Gobekli Tepe in an unprecedented category of archaeological mystery, a site that seemed capable of generating or interacting with energy in ways entirely unexplained by modern science. Researchers began considering the possibility that the flash was linked to the site's construction itself. Gobekli Tepe's T-shaped pillars are carved with patterns that align loosely with solar and lunar cycles, suggesting a sophisticated understanding of astronomy. Some theorists hypothesize that the arrangement of stones could focus or channel energy in subtle ways, perhaps creating conditions under which unusual luminous events might occur. This theory was speculative, bordering on the metaphysical, but it could not be dismissed outright because no other natural explanation had held up. Attempts to simulate the site's structural configuration using models and laser-based energy experiments failed to replicate the intensity of the recorded flash, leaving the phenomenon firmly in the realm of the inexplicable. Field reports noted additional anomalies in the vicinity. Minor fluctuations in ambient temperature were recorded seconds before the flash, as if energy were accumulating and then released in a sudden burst. Small electronic devices occasionally malfunctioned when brought near the enclosures, returning to normal once moved several meters away. These secondary effects were subtle, inconsistent, and difficult to quantify, yet their repeated occurrence suggested that the site itself might possess properties that interfere with conventional instrumentation. Local folklore, often dismissed by archaeologists as myth, describes the ridge as a place where the sky seems unusually close to the Earth and where lights occasionally appear at night without any source. Some researchers began reconsidering these stories in light of the new evidence. Gobekli Tepe's blinding flash continues to defy explanation, even after months of research. International teams have returned to the site, deploying even more sophisticated sensors, including hyperspectral imaging, particle detectors, and highly sensitive photometers, yet none have replicated the original event. The mystery has expanded beyond archaeology into physics, geology, and atmospheric science, drawing experts eager to probe the intersection of ancient construction and unexplained energy phenomena. Discussions in academic journals now explore whether the site was deliberately engineered to create such effects, or whether the flash was a rare and unrepeatable occurrence triggered by unknown natural conditions. For all the data collected and theories proposed, the blinding flash remains an anomaly without precedent, a singular moment in time captured by human instruments, but understood by no known laws. The T-shaped pillars stand silent, their carvings illuminated only by the setting sun, and the ridge atop which they rise seems indifferent to the questions it provokes. Every subsequent test, every calibration, every observation has only deepened the sense that Gobekli Tepe guards a secret far older and stranger than any excavation can reveal. The flash happened once, but its implications linger endlessly. The rhythmic pulses of Yonaguni. Shadows of the structure stretched across the ocean floor, where stone terraces and carved steps of Yonaguni rise beneath the shifting blue-green light. The monument, submerged off Japan's southern coast, presents a labyrinth of angular blocks, terraces and columns, worn smooth by millennia of currents. To divers it appears both deliberate and alien, as if a civilization had sculpted the seabed with precision lost to history. Even before the pulses were recorded, the site inspired questions, whether natural erosion or human hands had created these forms, and why such vast ordered structures would lie hidden beneath the waves. The water above absorbs sound and diffuses light, yet the monument retains a sense of presence, as if it listens and responds to the movements around it. A sudden resonance emerged during one of the first detailed sonar surveys. Devices designed to map the contours of the seafloor registered brief, rhythmic vibrations emanating from the monument's terraces. The pulses were subtle at first, repeating at intervals that suggested intentionality rather than random geological processes. Graphs revealed peaks and troughs that did not correspond to known tidal or seismic activity, and the measurements persisted even when instruments were repositioned. The sonar signals seemed to emanate from within the stone itself, passing through the water with a clarity that confounded engineers. No external sources, boats, underwater vents, or tectonic shifts could account for the steady cadence recorded over multiple sessions. Marine researchers noted the phenomenon with a mixture of awe and caution. Divers described a strange hum, almost imperceptible but insistent, that seemed to vibrate through their suits and echo along the ridges and terraces. Some reported sensations of pressure changes in the chest, while others felt as though the monument itself was resonating in synchrony with the pulses. Equipment occasionally registered fluctuations. Cameras would momentarily fail to record, digital compasses wavered, and lights mounted on submersible drones flickered unpredictably. Each observer's experience differed slightly, yet all converged on a sense of rhythm and coherence emanating from the stones. Patterns emerged as data from repeated surveys were analysed. The pulses were neither random nor chaotic. Sonar traces revealed consistent intervals, that suggested a sequence akin to signalling, yet no known language or system could be discerned. The vibrations spread through the terraces and steps in a manner that hinted at the monument's geometry, shaping the energy. Researchers attempted to correlate the signals with tidal, lunar and geomagnetic cycles, but no combination matched the regularity observed. The phenomenon persisted at all hours, sometimes intensifying, fading into near silence, but always returning with the same precise rhythm. Currents whispered around the monument in peculiar ways, as if responding to its energy. Small eddies formed where none should exist, and particles in the water suspended unnaturally, highlighting invisible waves. Marine life occasionally acted erratically near the terraces. Schools of fish paused as though sensing the pulses, while crustaceans shifted direction unpredictably. These subtle disturbances, combined with the instrument readings, gave the impression that the monument was not a passive remnant of the past, but an entity capable of influencing its environment in quiet, deliberate ways. Attempts to interpret the pulses met frustration at every turn. Geologists proposed explanations ranging from resonance within sediment layers to trapped air pockets in fractured stone. Physicists modelled wave propagation through the terraces, testing whether underwater acoustics could account for the regularity. Biologists considered the impact of marine life and its movement on sonar readings, yet every theory fell short. The pulses maintained a consistency and clarity that could not be produced by known natural forces or by human error. Each failure deepened the sense that the monument itself was responsible for the phenomenon, or that an as-yet undiscovered physical principle was at work. Each repetition reinforced the monument's enigmatic character. Unlike earthquakes or tidal fluctuations, the pulses did not vary with external conditions. Whether calm seas or storm-tossed waters, the sequence continued with unerring precision. Divers who returned for repeated observations found themselves haunted by the invisible rhythm, sensing the continuity of a signal that had endured for centuries, perhaps millennia. Its source remained opaque, leaving researchers to speculate on whether the structure had been intentionally designed to generate the pulses, or if some other force had co-opted its form to produce this effect. The monument seemed alive under the instrument's gaze. The terraces and steps, sculpted in geometric perfection, absorbed and reflected vibrations in ways that suggested a sophisticated understanding of acoustics. Some theorists speculated that the builders might have harnessed resonance deliberately, creating an underwater symphony that communicated or marked time. Others warned that such claims veered toward myth, cautioning that human perception is easily misled by repetition and subtle environmental cues. Regardless, the alignment of form, frequency and consistency left no room for simple coincidence. Measurements continued across multiple expeditions, each adding more layers of precision to the record. Hypersensitive sonar arrays, magnetic sensors, and acoustic modulators verified the pulse's persistence and exactitude. Attempts to simulate or replicate the effect in controlled environments failed. Even when researchers modelled the terraces digitally, no artificial recreation reproduced the timing, intensity, or propagation patterns of the original pulses. The monument remained singular in its ability to generate the signals, a submerged enigma that defied explanation. Silence returned between dives, but the data remained. Graphs, logs, and video recordings preserved the memory of the pulses, yet the meaning and cause eluded all attempts at understanding. The site's submerged terraces, steps, and columns seemed to hold their own secret, a rhythm encoded into stone waiting for those who could perceive it fully. The water above rippled gently, as if acknowledging the invisible heartbeat beneath. The pulses continue, imperceptible to the untrained ear, yet perfectly synchronized with the monument itself. The red glow above Machu Picchu. Mist clung to the terraces of Machu Picchu, weaving among the stone walls and stepped platforms in a haze that softened the contours of the citadel. The surrounding peaks pierced the clouds, their jagged silhouettes looming like sentinels over the hidden city. In 1950, a small expedition of archaeologists and photographers ascended the mountain, intent on documenting the Inca constructions with clarity not afforded by previous explorations. The high altitude left the air thin and crisp, and the morning sun struggled to penetrate the persistent veil of fog. Everything about the site conveyed isolation, a sense that the citadel had remained apart from the ordinary flow of time waiting to reveal its secrets only under circumstances the outside world could not predict. Cameras captured an extraordinary phenomenon as the team set up their equipment near the Temple of the Sun. A crimson illumination appeared above the central terraces, lingering with a consistency that suggested neither cloud reflection nor fleeting sunlight. Photographs showed the glow saturating the mist, painting the surrounding stone in an otherworldly hue. On film and in memory, the red light defied ordinary explanation, appearing too concentrated and persistent to result from natural atmospheric scattering or sunrise rays refracting through moisture. Observers noted that the colour did not fade with the shifting sun, nor did it align with the known patterns of reflection on nearby peaks. Observers recoiled instinctively, some shielding their eyes from a light that seemed to possess intensity without warmth. Whispers of astonishment travelled across the terraces as the team realised that the glow was not merely visual, it seemed to press subtly against the senses. The air remained cool, yet a faint tingling accompanied the illumination, an odd sensation that some described as electric or magnetic in nature. For several minutes the red light held, neither dispersing nor growing brighter, occupying the sky above Machu Picchu in a manner both majestic and unnerving. Even the usual sounds of mountain birds and rustling leaves fell into stillness, as though the landscape itself had paused in witness. Meteorologists reviewed the data and expedition notes after the event, seeking rational explanations. Weather logs confirmed clear skies above the horizon and minimal cloud cover, dismissing refraction or sunset anomalies. Geomagnetic records from nearby observatories showed no fluctuations significant enough to produce the luminous display. Atmospheric scientists considered rare auroral activity, but Machu Picchu's latitude placed it far outside the typical zones of aurora formation. Each line of investigation returned a null result, leaving only the photographs, written descriptions, and the memories of those present as the sole evidence of a phenomenon that had no recognized origin. The equipment registered subtle anomalies during the illumination. Cameras experienced brief exposure errors, compass needles wavered unexpectedly, and light meters recorded readings that exceeded the ambient intensity without an apparent source. Instruments designed to measure temperature and pressure showed no unusual readings, reinforcing the idea that the glow was neither thermal nor electrical in origin. While these effects were minor and inconsistent, their repeated coincidence with the glow strengthened the impression that the citadel and its environment had somehow interacted with forces not accounted for in conventional observation. Unexplained reflections appeared on nearby metallic tools and the lenses of cameras, creating fleeting red halos that could not be attributed to sunlight or lens flare. Some expedition members noted that even polished surfaces of stone scattered the light in patterns inconsistent with normal refraction, hinting at subtle interactions between the glow and the materials of the citadel itself. Measurements of these reflections suggested an intensity and wavelength that did not match atmospheric or solar light, implying the illumination possessed characteristics entirely unlike anything previously recorded at high-altitude archaeological sites. Birds scattered across the terraces, abandoning their usual perches and flight patterns, while small mammals appeared unusually restless. The motion of clouds overhead seemed almost imperceptibly accelerated, and the wind shifted without meteorological explanation, bending the mist in unusual ways. Even from a distance, the red illumination could be seen reflecting off adjacent cliffs, highlighting ridges and crevices normally hidden in shadow. The behavior of living creatures and the subtle alterations in environmental conditions lent the glow a tangible presence, suggesting that it was more than a simple optical phenomenon or camera artifact. Historians noted that similar descriptions of unexplained illuminations appeared sporadically in reports from high-altitude sites across the Andes. Travellers had occasionally reported skies tinged with red or gold above ruins long abandoned, though these accounts were often dismissed as misperception or atmospheric trickery. The 1950 Machu Picchu event, however, was supported by photographs and the corroboration of multiple witnesses, distinguishing it from anecdotal tales and placing it firmly within the realm of documented anomaly. These echoes of mystery suggested the possibility of a recurring localized phenomenon tied to ancient constructions in the region. The light persisted, bathing the stone in its vivid glow while the expedition struggled to comprehend its scale and significance. Discussions among the team vacillated between excitement and unease, with theories ranging from atmospheric ionization to unknown geomagnetic effects. Yet the intensity, colour and duration of the illumination defied all attempts at scientific replication. Subsequent visits to the site failed to produce anything comparable, leaving the photographs and journal entries as the only enduring record of an event that resisted understanding. Expeditions returned in the following decades, armed with more sophisticated instruments and technology capable of measuring light, radiation, and electromagnetic activity with extraordinary sensitivity. None replicated the red glow. Even under controlled conditions, with the sun, weather, and atmospheric variables carefully documented, the phenomenon refused to recur. The citadel remained tranquil, its terraces and temples silent witnesses to a moment of extraordinary illumination that had left no trace beyond human memory and fragile photographic evidence. Machu Picchu remains poised between history and mystery, a citadel under a sky that sometimes flares with unaccountable light. The Fumes of the Delphic Temple. Rising above the valley, the Temple of Apollo casts a commanding presence over Delphi, perched precariously on the slopes of Mount Parnassus. Mist coils around the cliffs, drifting across the stone terraces and partially concealing the temple's weathered columns. Travellers of antiquity described an atmosphere thick with reverence, and later visitors often reported sensations that went beyond simple awe. The location itself, wedged between sheer rock faces and deep fissures, suggested that forces both geological and atmospheric converged beneath the temple, setting the stage for phenomena that would confound observers for millennia. A sudden haze would sometimes appear, lingering around the inner sanctum and the aditon, a space historically reserved for the oracles. Accounts recorded centuries apart described dizziness, disorientation, and fleeting visions of shifting forms within the mist. The effect was subtle yet unmistakable, enough to influence those who entered the sacred space. Priests, pilgrims, and later explorers all described moments where perception seemed suspended, where sound and light behaved differently, and where thought itself felt stretched and altered. Ancient narratives hinted at these experiences as divine communication, but no one could explain why or how the effect occurred. Chemical detectors recorded the presence of hydrocarbon gases emanating from fissures and porous layers beneath the temple. Modern geologists identified methane, ethylene, and other volatile compounds, but their concentrations fluctuated unpredictably. At times, instruments registered sharp spikes, while moments later, the air seemed ordinary and inert. The readings suggested that these gases rose intermittently, following patterns that eluded explanation, and that they could accumulate in pockets within the stonework and subterranean cavities, awaiting release into the aditon above. Visitors reported sensations that defied simple description. Some described a light-headed euphoria, as if the boundaries between mind and surroundings had softened. Others spoke of visions, brief, vivid, and often fragmented, that dissipated when the air cleared. Researchers noted increased heart rates, mild nausea, and temporary sensory distortions, none of which could be traced to pathogens, toxic contamination, or structural hazards. The simultaneous consistency and unpredictability of these effects made the temple a unique natural laboratory for studying human consciousness under unusual environmental conditions. Efforts to reproduce the phenomenon proved equally perplexing. Controlled releases of hydrocarbons in similar concentrations failed to induce the same intensity of hallucinations or disorientation. Even with advanced ventilation, filtration and monitoring, researchers could not replicate the combination of physical and cognitive responses that occurred naturally within the temple. Each trial highlighted the elusiveness of the forces at play, and the subtle interplay between human perception and the temple's environment remained frustratingly beyond reach. Fissures and subterranean cavities beneath the stone foundations create channels that allow gases to rise to the surface. Geological surveys revealed fault lines, porous limestone layers, and natural vents aligned in ways that could concentrate the emissions. Some studies suggested that pressure variations in these channels might release sudden bursts of gas, while chemical reactions within the bedrock could alter their composition. Yet no configuration fully accounted for the variability of human responses or the intensity of the experiences described by both ancient and modern witnesses. Unexpected traces of ancient activity were found in areas where the fumes were strongest. researchers discovered soot-like residues and faint chemical stains on the stone floors and altar surfaces, suggesting that the temple's sacred rituals may have coincided with the natural release of gases. While no written records specify these practices, the correlation between ritual spaces and areas of gas accumulation hints at a deliberate awareness by the ancients of the temple's unusual properties, implying that the oracles may have understood, at least intuitively, the forces shaping human perception within the Adyton. Accounts from antiquity describe the oracles of Delphi entering the Adyton in a trance-like state, delivering prophecies inspired by forces beyond conventional understanding. Travelogues from later centuries echo these observations, often noting faint odours, sudden warmth, or disorienting light filtered through the temple stones. Each record emphasises the same central mystery. The temple consistently produced effects that could influence perception and thought, but no empirical mechanism could fully explain their origin. Experts remain divided over the nature of the fumes. Some argue that the geological and chemical evidence alone accounts for the altered states of consciousness, while others propose that a unique combination of atmospheric conditions, temple architecture, and volatile compounds produces a phenomenon not yet understood by modern science. Alternative theories suggest that the interaction of gases with magnetic fields, subtle electrical currents, or even psychoactive airborne particles could play a role, yet none of these explanations has been conclusively demonstrated. Observations over time reveal that the intensity and character of the fumes fluctuate unpredictably. One day, the Adyton may remain inert, while on another, the air seems charged with an unseen force capable of influencing even the most skeptical visitor. The temporal variability, combined with the temple's enduring isolation, ensures that no single study can capture the phenomenon in its entirety. Despite repeated measurements and continuous monitoring, the temple's behaviour resists prediction, reinforcing the notion that it operates according to laws or interactions not yet understood. The temple stands silent, its columns and inner chambers preserving the whispers of countless experiences, while the fissures beneath continue to breathe gases that have shaped perception for millennia. The magnetic distortion at Teotihuacan. Silent and immense, the Gate of the Sun rises from the high plateau of Teotihuacan, its perfectly carved stones and precise geometrical forms projecting a presence that seems to weigh on both body and mind, as if the ancient builders had not only shaped the rock, but subtly manipulated the forces that surround it, creating a monument that defies conventional understanding, even for those who stand before it today. The vastness of the Altiplano stretches in every direction, flat and empty, amplifying the monument's authority while isolating it from the world, leaving travellers and researchers alike to confront the unsettling sensation that something about the stones themselves is altering the space around them. Visitors often found themselves struggling to reconcile what they saw with what they felt, reporting an almost imperceptible tug on their sense of direction, a subtle misalignment between their perception of the terrain and the instruments they carried, as though the very field of gravity or magnetism had been shifted in the immediate vicinity of the gate, producing a quiet but persistent unease that left no trace on conventional maps or instruments that were not directly within its shadow. Explorers described walking along straight paths only to feel the pull of invisible forces, compasses wobbling erratically, as if caught between two conflicting poles, and even seasoned surveyors noted small but consistent deviations that refused explanation, hinting at a phenomenon that acted upon both technology and human intuition simultaneously. Instruments behaved oddly, with compasses spinning unpredictably while magnetometers registered fluctuations confined to a narrow radius around the monument, the disturbance absent mere meters away and unaffected by the known mineral composition of the stones, which contain no magnetic elements capable of producing such effects. Geophysical studies confirm that the basalt and andesite used in the construction of the gate are fundamentally non-magnetic, yet the readings persisted, creating a puzzle in which the environment, the monument, and human experience intersected in a manner that resisted all traditional scientific categorization and demanded a reconsideration of what forces might be at play. Those who approached closely described sensations that went beyond mere spatial disorientation, noting an uneasy lightness in their limbs, a subtle dizziness that could not be attributed to altitude alone, and an occasional fleeting sense that the stones themselves were vibrating imperceptibly beneath the feet, a phenomenon never reproduced in laboratory simulations and observed only in proximity to the monument, leaving even the most skeptical investigators to question whether the effect originated entirely from the natural world or from some interaction encoded within the monument's construction. Stonework aligned with astonishing precision across the site, forming geometrical relationships that suggest not only advanced knowledge of astronomy and engineering, but a potential understanding of forces invisible to human senses, as if the gate and its surrounding structures were intentionally designed to concentrate or channel fields of influence, creating pockets where navigation instruments faltered, balance wavered, and perception subtly warped, producing experiences that consistently confounded both human observers and scientific equipment alike. Surrounding soils and terrain were meticulously examined, revealing no deposits of metallic ores or anomalous rock formations capable of producing the localized effects, while surveys of the underlying geology, including fault lines and mineral veins, yielded no plausible explanation for the intensity or specificity of the distortion. The anomaly appeared independent of external geomagnetic activity, unaffected by solar storms or local atmospheric conditions, as though it were self-contained, anchored to the monument and the space immediately around it, in a way that defied conventional environmental logic. Subtle temperature shifts were also noted in the immediate vicinity of the gate, with air slightly warmer along the axis of the monument and cooler at the periphery, creating faint convection currents that could influence both compass needles and the human sense of balance. Researchers speculated that these microclimatic variations might interact with geomagnetic anomalies, intensifying the effects on instruments and perception in unpredictable ways, yet the precise mechanism remained entirely unquantifiable, adding another layer of mystery to an already perplexing sight. Measurements yielded inconsistent results across different expeditions and instruments. Some magnetometers responded strongly, while others registered only faint variations. Repeat tests at various times of day produced deviations that fluctuated without a discernible pattern. This reinforced the idea that the distortion was both real and elusive, a persistent enigma that could not be pinned down or isolated. It resisted classification, leaving each subsequent study to begin anew in the hope of uncovering principles that might never be observed. Legends persisted among local communities and in early traveller accounts. They described how certain areas around the Gate of the Sun could cause travellers to lose their bearings, experience sudden vertigo, or feel the pull of unseen forces that seemed to rearrange space itself. This recognition of the anomaly came long before the advent of modern instrumentation and suggested that the phenomenon had been observed and perhaps even respected for generations. Its influence was acknowledged in stories and warnings rather than fully understood. Repeated studies over decades failed to explain the distortion, leaving geophysicists, archaeologists, and explorers baffled. Every investigation reinforced both its reality and its elusiveness, leaving the site in a state of perpetual uncertainty where empirical evidence and human perception converge but never fully resolve. Each visitor confronts an experience that is as precise as it is inexplicable, as localized as it is unrepeatable. The monument simultaneously belongs to the world and to forces beyond it. The gate endures, carved stone and silent witness to an invisible power that bends perception and instruments alike. The disappearing petroglyphs of Easter Island. Carved into volcanic rock, the petroglyphs of Easter Island once etched their stories across the rugged terrain, silent witnesses to a culture both isolated and sophisticated, their forms ranging from abstract motifs to depictions of birds, humans, and mysterious symbols whose meaning has eluded scholars for centuries. Each carving, deeply embedded in stone, seemed impervious to time, resisting the erosive forces of wind, rain, and sun. Yet over the decades, explorers and researchers began to notice a perplexing pattern. The once carefully catalogued symbols were vanishing, leaving the rocks strangely blank and the landscape subtly altered, as if memory itself had been scraped away. Observers of the past noted the carvings with meticulous care, recording their dimensions, orientations, and intricate designs in journals and photographs, creating a baseline of knowledge that later generations would rely upon. Early 20th century anthropologists described dozens of petroglyphs clustered near ceremonial sites, their surfaces showing wear consistent with age, but no indication of deliberate removal. Travellers and local guides corroborated these observations, recounting the precise locations of motifs that adorned stone faces and gentle slopes, suggesting a continuity of awareness and reverence for the carvings over centuries. Years later, researchers returned to the same sites, armed with the intention of studying the petroglyphs in greater detail, only to encounter inconsistencies that defied explanation. Entire carvings documented in earlier surveys were no longer present, while others showed signs of erosion inconsistent with the surrounding stone. Photographs taken decades apart captured subtle yet undeniable differences. Edges that once held intricate patterns now appeared smooth, hollows filled, surfaces uniform, as if some invisible hand had erased what had been so carefully inscribed. Contemporary archaeologists scoured the island systematically, employing modern mapping techniques, GPS coordinates, and detailed surveys to locate every documented petroglyph. Yet, despite their efforts, numerous carvings remained untraceable, leaving gaps in the historical record that could not be attributed to natural weathering or human interference. Sites that had once been rich with symbolic imagery now presented only empty stone, and each absence was recorded with a mixture of fascination and frustration, deepening the sense of mystery that seemed to envelop the island's cultural legacy. In the anomalies, faint patterns began to take shape, suggesting that the disappearance was not entirely accidental. Certain clusters of carvings vanished while others, sometimes mere meters away, remained perfectly intact. Symbols depicting particular figures or themes were more frequently absent than others, hinting at an unknown selective process that guided the erasure. The consistency of these patterns puzzled scholars, as they appeared immune to environmental factors that should have affected all surfaces equally, reinforcing the notion that a force beyond ordinary erosion might be at work. Closer examination revealed subtle surface anomalies on some rocks that had lost their carvings, including faint depressions, scratches, and variations in lichen growth, suggesting that the disappearance might leave microscopic traces, imperceptible to casual observation but detectable under careful study. These minute signs hint at processes, whether environmental, chemical, or entirely unknown, that alter the stone at a level below human perception, as if the carvings were gradually eroded from memory itself, leaving only an almost ghostly imprint of what once existed. Island elders recounted stories passed down through generations, speaking of stones that seemed to change when unobserved, of symbols that appeared at one time only to vanish later, and of a sacredness tied not only to the motifs themselves, but to their ephemeral quality. These oral histories, though fragmentary and often poetic in expression, aligned uncannily with the inconsistencies observed by modern researchers, suggesting that the phenomenon had persisted across centuries and had been witnessed long before scientific instruments arrived to document it. Unexpected correlations appeared between the missing petroglyphs and areas where seasonal runoff was most pronounced, although erosion alone cannot account for the selective loss of carvings, as adjacent stones and nearby motifs remain perfectly preserved. Researchers speculate that water, mineral deposits, and the porous volcanic rock may interact in ways that subtly alter surfaces over decades, amplifying the already mysterious phenomenon and reinforcing the idea that both natural and unexplained forces might contribute to the vanishing of these ancient symbols. Even advanced mapping revealed little more than what human eyes had already perceived. Certain petroglyphs recorded in the early photographic surveys no longer existed in any detectable form. High-resolution 3D scanning and satellite imaging confirmed the absence, providing undeniable evidence that these carvings were not merely obscured by vegetation or erosion, but had, in some inexplicable way, disappeared entirely from the bedrock. The technology brought precision, yet it brought no answers, only a heightened awareness of the island's enduring enigma. Theories range from subtle geological shifts that could alter the visibility of carvings to undocumented human interference to the possibility of environmental or even magnetic influences that might affect the perception of the motifs, yet each explanation faltered when measured against the evidence. Stones in adjacent areas remained unaffected, environmental conditions failed to account for the selective loss, and historical records offered no indication of removal or destruction, leaving the mystery unresolved and fueling speculation that the disappearance itself was a phenomenon beyond current comprehension. The implications extend far beyond Easter Island, challenging assumptions about permanence, historical documentation, and the reliability of observation. If petroglyphs can vanish without a trace, the very foundation of what humans consider enduring evidence becomes uncertain. scholars are forced to confront the possibility that history can be rewritten not only by human hands, but also by forces that remain invisible, imperceptible, and entirely unpredictable, erasing traces of civilizations long after they have been recorded. The stones whisper secrets that no survey can preserve, their vanished markings leaving behind only an emptiness that seems to pulse with the memory of hands long gone and eyes that once traced their lines. The Saqqara tomb affliction. Anticipation hung thickly over the excavation site as the team prepared to open the untouched burial chamber in Saqqara, the air taut with a mixture of reverence, curiosity, and the weight of history pressing against each archaeologist's chest. Every movement was deliberate, every tool carefully aligned, and every breath taken with awareness of the centuries that had passed since the tomb had last been disturbed. The chamber promised insight into a long-forgotten era, a glimpse of a civilization's ritual practices frozen in time, yet an unspoken tension lingered, as if the very act of intrusion might awaken something beyond human understanding. Subtle discomforts emerged almost immediately among those who stepped into the tomb, beginning with slight dizziness, mild headaches, and a general sense of heaviness that none could easily explain. Workers exchanged uneasy glances as the air inside seemed to press closer to their lungs, and even the most experienced archaeologists felt a faint nausea as they surveyed the intricate hieroglyphs and funerary artifacts that remained astonishingly intact. There was no immediate cause. The air was stale but breathable, the temperature within the chamber consistent, and yet a silent, creeping malaise took hold, hinting that the tomb harboured more than history alone. Symptoms multiplied rapidly over the following hours, spreading in unpredictable waves across the team, striking some with sudden fevers, others with acute fatigue or disorientation. Panic began to creep in alongside the illness, not from visible danger but from the uncanny simultaneity of affliction and the absence of explanation, as if the chamber itself were a vessel of invisible influence. Efforts to continue work were abandoned, tools set down mid-task, and the archaeologists retreated, not with the relief of completion but with the unsettled realization that something inside had touched them in ways that science could not yet quantify. Medical examinations revealed no known pathogens or toxins, and radiological scans returned normal results, leaving the team's physicians baffled. Blood work, tissue samples, and air analyses all failed to indicate any conventional cause for the afflictions, while the symptoms themselves seemed too uniform and too specific to be purely psychological. Each test added to the mystery rather than dispelling it, confirming that the illness, while real and measurable, was not the result of bacteria, viruses, or chemical contamination, and leaving investigators to confront the unsettling notion that the tomb's influence was neither visible nor detectable by contemporary methods. Every test failed to explain the affliction, reinforcing a sense of futility that hovered over the site like an invisible shroud. Environmental inspections detected nothing unusual. No hidden mold, no pockets of gas, no radiation. Instruments designed to monitor airflow, humidity, and dust showed only stable readings, contradicting the very experience of the people inside the chamber. The failure of objective evidence to align with observable illness created an unbridgeable gap between fact and perception, a space in which doubt and fear festered, leaving even the most rational observers questioning the limits of their understanding. Ancient texts hint at warnings that have persisted for millennia, scattered references to the dangers of disturbing sacred spaces and to consequences that befell those who violated the resting places of the dead. While these documents are fragmentary and often allegorical, their existence underscores a recurring theme in Egyptian funerary culture: the reverence and caution expected around tombs. The parallel between these ancient admonitions and the modern experiences of illness lends an eerie credibility to stories long dismissed as superstition, suggesting that knowledge of these dangers may have been encoded in ritual and practice, even if its mechanism remains elusive. Fear began to infiltrate not only the bodies but the minds of those present, influencing behaviour, slowing movement, and eroding confidence in every decision. Teams hesitated to enter or re-enter the chamber, and whispers of curses circulated despite the absence of evidence. The psychological weight of unexplained illness compounded the physical symptoms, creating a feedback loop in which anxiety amplified perception, and perception intensified anxiety, making the tomb a locus of both corporeal and mental unease. Subsequent investigations uncovered peculiar patterns in the timing and intensity of the afflictions, noting that symptoms appeared most severely in those who spent the longest periods examining particular artifacts or hieroglyphic inscriptions, while brief observers were comparatively unaffected. Researchers speculated that some combination of psychological focus, micro-environmental conditions, or unknown energy interactions might amplify the tomb's influence selectively, yet no quantifiable mechanism could be identified, leaving the phenomenon as baffling as the initial outbreak and suggesting that the tomb itself might somehow choose its victims. Advanced analyses returned inconclusive results, as modern researchers revisited the tomb decades later with more sophisticated tools, including bioassays, particle sampling, and atmospheric simulations, yet nothing reproduced the original effects. The absence of measurable causation challenged expectations of reproducibility and scientific authority, leaving the phenomenon as enigmatic as the tomb itself. Each attempt to quantify or understand only reinforced the notion that some aspects of the ancient world might resist empirical scrutiny, preserving their mystery beyond the reach of human reason. Even decades later, the Saqqara tomb affliction endures in historical and scientific records as an anomaly without parallel, a chilling reminder that not all phenomena can be explained or controlled. Scholars, archaeologists, and medical experts continue to debate, theorize, and speculate, yet the tomb remains unchanged, silent and inscrutable, its walls holding secrets that evade the grasp of modern inquiry while continuing to fascinate and terrify in equal measure. Silence dominates the chamber, a quiet so profound that it seems to thrum with the memory of those who entered and fell ill, leaving an invisible mark on history that no measurement can capture. The lost alignment of Karnak. Stretching across the Breton Plain, the megalithic rows of Karnak rise in disciplined, silent order, their stones standing like sentinels of a civilization long vanished, each monolith a testament to precision, labour, and intent that has survived millennia. The sheer scale of the alignments, extending for miles in what appears to be carefully calculated geometry, speaks to a culture with knowledge of engineering and astronomy that continues to awe modern observers. Yet amid this striking display, anomalies quietly undermine certainty, hinting that the monument we see today is incomplete. Early antiquarians recorded the full extent of the rows in meticulous sketches and measurements, documenting stones that are now missing and describing lines that extended further than what remains visible to this day. Their journals, maps, and illustrations provide a historical baseline, creating a tension between recorded history and present observation, a discrepancy that has puzzled generations of researchers who attempt to reconcile the surviving stones with these archival records. Surveyors in the 20th century noted gaps in the alignment, areas where the stones seemed abruptly to end, or where spacing was inconsistent with the careful rhythm observed elsewhere. Field measurements suggested that missing monoliths had once filled these voids, yet there were no remnants of quarries, no evidence of transport or removal, and no records of human interference that could explain the apparent disappearance. The irregularities are subtle, yet they convey an unmistakable sense of absence, a missing link in a monumental chain that invites speculation but resists definitive interpretation. Ground-penetrating instruments revealed subsurface voids beneath certain sections of the alignments, spaces precisely where missing stones were expected to stand. These cavities, consistent in pattern and depth, suggest that some monoliths may have been buried intentionally, collapsed, or otherwise removed from sight long before modern observation. Yet even the most detailed radar scans fail to indicate their current location or composition. The ground itself seems to preserve the memory of what has vanished, recording absence in ways that are tangible yet impervious to recovery. Recent geophysical surveys uncovered anomalies beneath the plain, including subtle density variations in soil and stone that may correspond to buried fragments or supports once associated with the lost alignment. While no complete monoliths were recovered, these findings indicate that the missing stones may not have disappeared entirely, but instead were concealed beneath layers of earth, leaving a cryptic record that challenges both interpretation and excavation, suggesting that part of the monument exists in a state inaccessible to casual observation. Excavations yielded fragments of stone and disturbed soil in select areas, but no complete monoliths or quarries were ever discovered, leaving investigators to question whether the missing stones had been deliberately hidden, destroyed, or removed entirely. Archaeologists have combed the surrounding landscape for signs of ancient activity that could account for the disappearance, yet each search reinforces the mystery rather than resolving it, revealing only subtle disturbances in earth and vegetation that provide hints without answers. From the study of the gaps, patterns became apparent, revealing regularities in distance, alignment, and orientation that suggest the missing stones were not random, but followed a coherent plan, possibly tied to astronomical events, ritual pathways, or cultural symbolism. Some voids align with solstitial points or particular celestial markers, hinting at a deeper purpose that modern observers can only partially reconstruct, while other missing stones appear positioned to maintain a visual symmetry across the rows, leaving the possibility that their disappearance has obscured an intentional design that once spanned the entire plain. Closer inspection of surviving stones revealed subtle markings on their lower surfaces, faint engravings that had gone unnoticed in earlier surveys, hinting at measurements, numbering, or symbolic motifs meant to correspond with the missing monoliths. These marks suggest that the ancient builders may have intentionally documented the positions of stones that no longer exist, creating a hidden system of reference that preserves knowledge of the full alignment even as the physical structures themselves vanished. Digital reconstructions suggested that the original alignment may have extended far beyond what remains, creating an intricate network of stones capable of marking time, seasons, or celestial phenomena with startling accuracy. These simulations, built from historical records and remaining structures, reveal a monument of staggering complexity, and yet the gaps in physical evidence inject a profound sense of incompleteness, as though the rows themselves carry the ghost of what has been lost, guiding the imagination of those who attempt to understand them. Scholars debated whether the missing stones were casualties of natural erosion, deliberate human action, or something altogether more enigmatic, with hypotheses ranging from early construction errors to ceremonial removal or even unknown forces capable of altering the landscape over centuries. Each theory encounters limitations, failing to reconcile the regularity of gaps with the total absence of physical evidence, leaving the alignment suspended between human craftsmanship and inexplicable disappearance, a puzzle that refuses closure despite centuries of study. Extensive research, fieldwork, and technological analysis have yet to solve the lost alignment, which endures as one of Karnak's most haunting enigmas. It stands as a silent testament to absence as much as presence, and a reminder that the landscape itself can harbour secrets impervious to human understanding. Each surviving stone marks not only what was erected, but also what has vanished, offering glimpses of a monument whose full scale and purpose remain tantalizingly out of reach. The rows stretch on, their missing stones evoking questions that linger across generations, as if the plain itself conspires to remind observers that some parts of history can vanish entirely, leaving only echoes in stone. The subterranean ice of Pumapunku. Unexpectedly, within a sealed chamber beneath the Bolivian ruins of Pumapunku, explorers encountered an expanse of ice so perfectly preserved that its existence defied the expectations of both climate and geology, a frozen expanse that seemed to resist the sun, the seasons, and the passage of centuries. The moment of discovery was marked by hushed exclamations and a palpable sense of wonder, for the chamber itself offered no immediate explanation, no subterranean glacier, no hidden water source, and no evidence of human refrigeration. Yet the ice lay intact, unsoftened, and impossibly cold. Fingers brushed its surface, feeling an almost unnatural hardness and smoothness that contrasted sharply with the rough, weathered stones surrounding it, and a faint chill radiated upward, settling into the bones of those who dared linger. Light reflected off its facets in a way that suggested crystalline purity, yet small air bubbles trapped within the ice hinted at unknown origins, a process of formation that no known natural phenomenon could fully account for. The explorers noted subtle patterns on the surface, almost as if the ice had been poured or shaped with intention, though there was no trace of tools or human intervention. Prolonged examination revealed that the ice resisted melting, remaining solid even as ambient temperatures climbed. Thermometers, thermal cameras, and environmental sensors all recorded readings inconsistent with the ice's persistence, creating a paradox that challenged the principles of physics and climatology alike. No airflow or shade could account for its survival, and repeated observation only deepened the impression that the chamber harboured a phenomenon at once tangible and inexplicable. Repeated experiments revealed that even when exposed to controlled heating, the ice's core remained unnervingly cold, suggesting a mechanism of preservation that eluded contemporary science. Chemical analyses returned no anomalies in mineral content, no additives or natural antifreeze compounds, and no indication of subterranean water replenishment, leaving researchers unable to reconcile the ice's stability with its environmental context. Each test confirmed that the anomaly was real, measurable, and wholly resistant to rational explanation. Analysis of ice core samples revealed unexpected stratification, thin layers of varying density and composition that suggest a history of slow accumulation, compression, or even intermittent melting and refreezing over centuries. The layers carry microscopic mineral traces in tiny air pockets, each recording environmental conditions long before the chamber was rediscovered, yet their arrangement defies conventional glaciology, implying a preservation process that cannot be explained by known climatic or geological mechanisms. Stonework and masonry suggested extraordinary care in the chamber's construction, with precisely cut blocks, sealed joints, and dense, compacted layers that might have insulated the ice over centuries. The builders demonstrated an understanding of materials and structural integrity that is remarkable even by modern standards, yet no combination of engineering principles fully accounts for the phenomenon. The chamber seems designed to preserve its contents with a precision that exceeds the most meticulous calculations of present-day archaeologists and engineers, leaving the ice as both artifact and enigma. Surrounding rock formations exhibit unusual thermal conductivity, with certain stone blocks absorbing and redirecting heat in a manner that could, theoretically, stabilize the chamber's internal temperature. While this property alone cannot account for the ice's survival over centuries, it hints at a possible interplay between ancient construction techniques and natural geology, a subtle synergy that may have contributed to the chamber's enduring cold, leaving researchers to wonder whether knowledge of such properties was intentional or purely coincidental. Elsewhere, ancient builders have left similar traces of environmental manipulation, from subterranean storage chambers in highland civilizations to crypts designed to maintain unusual temperatures or humidity levels. Comparisons suggest that human ingenuity may have played a role, yet in each case the phenomenon can usually be explained by structural or natural factors, except at Pumapunku, where conventional reasoning fails and the ice remains untouched by time and environment. Some scientists speculate that microclimatic effects, subterranean air currents, or geophysical anomalies could interact in ways not yet understood, creating conditions for long-term preservation. Others consider the possibility of unknown physical forces, localized magnetic influences, or even forgotten ancient knowledge of thermal management, each theory confronting the limits of observation and testing. While conjecture flourishes, the ice itself remains indifferent, a silent witness to human curiosity and scientific frustration alike. Artifacts near the ice hint at cultural significance, with offerings, tools, and carved stones positioned in a manner suggesting ritual interaction with the chamber and its contents. The alignment of objects and orientation of the space may indicate that the builders deliberately harnessed the ice, either as a sacred element, a temporal marker, or an enduring repository of spiritual or practical value. Yet any intentional purpose is obscured by time, leaving only traces and speculation for modern observers to reconstruct. Even with decades of study, including the latest thermodynamic simulations, ground-penetrating radar, and environmental modelling, the ice defies replication or satisfactory explanation. Each investigation reinforces the duality of its existence, perfectly natural yet entirely anomalous, physically present yet scientifically elusive. Researchers return to the chamber repeatedly, only to confront the same questions and the same chilling lack of answers, a puzzle that challenges both empirical reasoning and the imagination. A cold exhalation lingers in the chamber, carrying the weight of centuries and the quiet insistence that some secrets are designed to endure, untouched by science, beyond the reach of human understanding. The measured tremor beneath Petra. A faint trembling stirred beneath the feet of researchers exploring the treasury facade, a subtle vibration that seemed almost to pulse through the stone itself, perceptible before any instruments had confirmed its presence. The sensation was so delicate that it could have been dismissed as fatigue or the uneven terrain, yet it lingered long enough to provoke curiosity and a quiet sense of unease among the team, hinting at forces operating beneath the ancient monument that defied immediate understanding. Sensors recorded an unusual rhythm, the data revealing precise intervals between vibrations that suggested neither random geological activity nor the settling of stone. Seismic instruments picked up the pulses repeatedly, their consistency astonishing in a region of otherwise stable bedrock, producing a pattern that seemed almost deliberate, as though the mountain itself had been attuned to a hidden cadence. Each cycle carried a measurable impact on the surrounding sandstone, small but detectable shifts that intrigued seismologists and archaeologists alike, leaving both groups questioning the boundary between natural and inexplicable. No natural explanation sufficed. Tectonic activity, subterranean water channels, and the occasional minor rockfall were all considered and systematically ruled out, each hypothesis failing to account for the regularity, frequency, and localization of the tremors beneath the treasury. The lack of known fault lines, underground reservoirs, or mechanical sources created a tension between observation and expectation, a contradiction that modern instruments could measure yet could not fully rationalize. Inside the carved chambers, investigators examined the rock with microscopes, stress meters, and acoustic sensors, seeking signs of movement, voids, or hidden fractures that might explain the phenomenon. The masonry, precise and enduring, revealed no cavities aligned with the tremor's epicenter, no structural anomalies that could account for the measured vibrations, and no material properties that suggested any conventional resonance capable of producing such a consistent pulse. The stone itself remained impervious, yet the tremors persisted, invisible yet undeniably present. Measurements revealed a pattern that baffled researchers further. The pulses maintained nearly identical intervals over hours, with subtle fluctuations that suggested an underlying order, as if the monument had been designed to produce or channel these vibrations. The regularity implied a hidden mechanism or influence, one that eluded conventional geophysics, leaving scientists to ponder whether the pulses were purely natural, an overlooked geological rhythm, or the remnant of some ancient, now-lost engineering knowledge. Observers noted an unsettling sensation in response to the tremors, a quiet resonance felt in the chest, a slight dizziness, or a heightened awareness of the surrounding stone surfaces. These physiological effects were consistent among multiple researchers, suggesting that the vibrations were not merely physical but could interact with human perception in a way that amplified their presence. Some described the experience as almost hypnotic, a subtle awareness of the monument itself, communicating through pulse and frequency, a communication that science could record but not interpret. High-resolution acoustic mapping revealed subtle harmonics, frequencies barely audible yet measurable within the treasury chamber and surrounding corridors, producing faint vibrations that corresponded with the seismic pulses. The effect seemed to amplify the tremors in localized areas, creating standing waves that could interact with human perception, as if the stone itself were attuned to an unknown resonance. Such patterns could not be traced to structural defects or natural echoes, suggesting an underlying phenomenon that connected architecture, geology, and an invisible rhythm in ways not yet understood. At distant sites, similar faint pulses have been reported in other monumental structures, from subterranean chambers beneath megalithic temples to rock-cut sanctuaries where instruments detect slight rhythmic vibrations. These occurrences rarely coincide with known geological activity, and while they are less pronounced than those beneath Petra, their existence hints at a recurring mystery within ancient construction, a subtle dialogue between architecture and the hidden forces of the earth. Theories abound among scientists attempting to make sense of the phenomenon, ranging from undiscovered natural resonance, geomagnetic fluctuations, or piezoelectric properties within the rock, to more speculative ideas involving unknown ancient engineering techniques or forgotten methods of manipulating subterranean energy. Each theory is tantalizing yet incomplete, supported by fragments of data yet contradicted by other measurements, leaving the tremors as a puzzle both measurable and inexplicable. Attempts to simulate the tremors in laboratory conditions failed, with scaled models, acoustic chambers, and geophysical simulations unable to reproduce the precise regularity and subtle force detected beneath Petra. Every controlled experiment revealed inconsistencies, confirming that the phenomenon is not easily reducible to known physical principles. Researchers returned to the site with renewed awe and a growing sense of the monument's enigmatic presence, realizing that the pulses beneath Petra are not only measurable but also fundamentally resistant to replication, reinforcing the notion that the site continues to harbour a secret that spans centuries. Ancient chronicles hint at reverence for the treasury and surrounding cliffs, noting rituals, offerings, and precise alignments, yet none describe the tremors themselves. It remains possible that the builders were aware of the vibrations, whether consciously harnessed or simply encountered, but the passage of centuries has obscured any direct record. Modern observers are left with instruments, data points, and the subtle imprint of forces that resist interpretation, a bridge between past and present that exists in rhythm rather than in words. An imperceptible pulse lingers beneath the stone, measurable yet intangible, a silent heartbeat that no human hand can still and no instrument can fully decipher. The resonant voices of Hal Saflieni Hypogeum. Soft Globigerina limestone gives shape to the Hypogeum, a hidden network winding beneath Paula's modern streets. Its chambers descend 3 levels into the earth, winding through corridors that feel both deliberate and labyrinthine, as though designed to confuse and enthrall in equal measure. Archaeologists have long marvelled at the precision of its construction, noting the smoothness of walls, the symmetry of chambers, and the careful placement of burial niches. Yet beneath the historical and architectural fascination lies a phenomenon that continues to confound modern science. Within the Hypogeum, sound behaves in ways that defy conventional acoustics. Certain frequencies, isolated through careful testing, set the chambers into resonance that produces physical and psychological effects on those inside. Visitors who speak or sing within specific areas of the Hypogeum report sensations that range from dizziness and nausea to euphoria and hallucinations. Voices seem to reverberate with an intelligence of their own, moving through corridors and wrapping around the listener in ways that cannot be reproduced outside the structure. Even when microphones and high-fidelity recording devices are placed in the chambers, playback fails to capture the same phenomenon. Researchers attempting to recreate the resonance in laboratory conditions have duplicated the measured sound frequencies but cannot reproduce the intensity of the experience. The stone itself appears to act as an amplifier, yet its properties are not fully understood. Detailed acoustic mapping reveals that resonance is concentrated in certain rooms, particularly in the so-called oracle chamber. Sound waves entering these spaces increase in amplitude in highly localized patterns, sometimes forming standing waves that vibrate at frequencies barely perceptible to the human ear. Microfractures and subtle variations in wall curvature may contribute to these effects, but similar limestone structures elsewhere do not produce the same phenomena. The hypothesis that the builders possessed empirical knowledge of sound manipulation gains weight when considering the deliberate geometry of the corridors and chambers. Every corner, alcove, and niche seems precisely calculated to interact with vibrations in a way that amplifies and directs energy. Historical accounts and archaeological evidence suggest that the Hypogeum was not merely a burial site, but also a ceremonial space. The placement of human remains, symbolic engravings, and intricate carvings hints at ritualistic activity that may have incorporated sound as an essential element. Some researchers speculate that the resonance was intentionally harnessed to induce altered states of consciousness. In these moments, individuals might have experienced visions, prophetic insights, or encounters that were interpreted as communication with the ancestors. Whether this knowledge was theoretical, trial and error, or intuitive remains unknown. The physiological effects of resonance are unpredictable. Volunteers exposed to the same frequencies often report varying degrees of dizziness, anxiety, or euphoria, suggesting that human sensitivity to these sounds is highly individual. Environmental factors such as humidity, temperature, and time of day appear to modify the resonance, producing subtle shifts in vibration patterns. These variations make scientific study difficult, leaving researchers with tantalizing glimpses of the phenomenon but no definitive answers. The Hypogeum seems to operate at the intersection of architecture, material science, and neurobiology, yet no model fully explains how these elements interact to produce the reported experiences. Adding to the mystery, sensitive electronic equipment often malfunctions when placed inside the chambers. Electromagnetic sensors detect brief spikes of energy that coincide with resonant events, although no natural source for these pulses has been identified. Some speculate that the resonance may interact with electromagnetic fields, amplifying sensations in ways that cannot be easily quantified. Others suggest the energy may be a product of human perception itself, triggered by subtle vibrations in the environment. Regardless of the cause, the combination of sound, material, and human response produces a phenomenon that remains outside the reach of conventional science. Observers describe voices that seem to emanate from the walls rather than from any human speaker. Some report hearing names, phrases, or chants in languages unrecognizable to the modern ear. The voices sometimes shift location unpredictably, giving the impression of movement within the stone. Audio analysis has yet to identify an artificial source, confirming that the effect is either an extraordinary acoustic property or a unique interaction between human perception and the environment. Researchers continue to debate whether the builders of the Hypogeum understood the physiological consequences of sound resonance, or whether the effect was an incidental discovery that was later ritualized. Preservation concerns limit the scope of experimentation. The limestone is delicate and invasive techniques risk permanent damage, so non-intrusive methods are preferred. Simulations and computer models suggest that resonance could be enhanced or diminished by minor adjustments to geometry or surface texture, but no digital recreation has successfully captured the full experience of being inside the Hypogeum. Even the most sophisticated acoustic chambers in modern laboratories fail to replicate the combination of physical vibration, auditory clarity, and psychological impact. The phenomenon appears to exist only within the original structure, tied intrinsically to the specific conditions of its construction. Visitors who linger inside report an otherworldly sense of presence, as though the walls themselves are alive with memory. Low hums precede the appearance of voices, and vibrations are sometimes felt through the feet and chest rather than the ears. Many describe a sense of weightlessness or disorientation that cannot be attributed to conventional acoustics. The Hypogeum, in its silence and resonance, continues to challenge understanding, suggesting that the ancient builders encoded a knowledge that modern science can observe but cannot fully grasp. Employing advanced laser vibrometry, recent studies have revealed that the stone surfaces themselves subtly shift at microscopic levels when specific frequencies are produced, suggesting that the Hypogeum may function as a mechanical to sensory transducer. These micro-vibrations appear to resonate in harmony with certain neural oscillations in the human brain, potentially amplifying emotional and perceptual responses. Intriguingly, repeated measurements show that even empty chambers exhibit these vibrations without a human source, hinting at a latent energy encoded in the architecture itself. Such findings raise the possibility that the builders intentionally crafted spaces capable of interacting directly with human perception, a concept far ahead of any known prehistoric knowledge. The voices of Hal Saflieni are more than echoes of the past. They're fragments of a knowledge lost to time, vibrating silently in the stone, waiting for those who dare to listen. The moving lights of Newgrange. Morning light spilled over the River Boyne Valley, painting the winter landscape in muted golds and greys. Mist clung to the ground, curling around ancient stones and drifting through the low-lying fields. Newgrange rose ahead, its massive facade carved from weathered stone, precise and commanding despite millennia of exposure. Observers moved cautiously along the narrow path leading to the entrance, their breaths forming small clouds in the cold air. Every step carried a sense of anticipation. The site had long been known for its winter solstice alignment, but what they were about to witness promised something beyond ordinary expectation. The soft scrape of boots against gravel and the murmur of voices seemed swallowed by the valley, leaving a heavy silence that weighed over the scene like an unseen presence. A subtle glow first appeared along the chamber floor, just within the threshold of the inner passage. It was faint at first, barely discernible from the dim light of dawn, yet it pulsed gently, as though breathing in rhythm with the valley itself. Observers described it as almost alive, shifting slightly in colour from pale gold to a muted white, flickering along surfaces that should have remained dark. Some reached forward instinctively, convinced the light would vanish if approached, while others hesitated, afraid to disturb a phenomenon they could not explain. The initial moments felt fragile, the boundary between perception and imagination thin, and for a few heartbeats, those present questioned whether the glow was real or conjured by expectation. Then the points of light began to move. They slid across the walls, climbed in arcs, and occasionally hovered mid-air, defying the paths predicted by the solstice sunbeam. Geometric calculations of the chamber's alignment offered no explanation for their trajectories, which twisted and curved in ways that seemed deliberate yet unpredictable. Shadows cast by the lights shifted independently of their sources, bending and elongating along the chamber's irregular surfaces. Some observers raised cameras, only to find that recorded images captured a fraction of the motion and brilliance seen by the naked eye. The light's movement suggested a will of their own, as if the chamber had been designed to channel both sun and perception in ways that challenge understanding. Records from the past hint at a continuity of this phenomenon across centuries. Irish folklore speaks of guiding fires that traversed the chamber during the darkest part of winter, leading ancestors' spirits to their resting places. Medieval chronicles, though fragmented, recount priests and villagers witnessing points of illumination that appeared without lantern or flame, moving in patterns that defied human understanding. Even if myth and exaggeration have softened some details, the consistency of description across eras suggests that observers have long encountered a phenomenon as perplexing as it is mesmerizing. These ancient accounts lend weight to the idea that the moving lights are more than a simple optical trick, forming a thread of continuity between past and present. Light behaves strangely in the chamber, likely affected by the subtle elements of Newgrange's construction. The corbelled roof, built with layers of limestone that narrow toward the apex, creates tiny pockets of reflected sunlight and shadow that shift with minute changes in the sun's angle. Polished quartz stones embedded in the passageway reflect and scatter light in irregular patterns, yet experiments suggest these alone cannot reproduce the moving points observers describe. Tiny fissures in the walls and ceiling may refract light in unpredictable ways, while the precise orientation of the entrance relative to the winter solstice sun seems almost impossibly exact. These architectural nuances suggest that the builders possessed an intuitive understanding of light and shadow, exploiting natural materials to create effects that continue to surprise and challenge modern perception. Scientists have attempted to quantify the effect using high-speed cameras, spectrographs, and light meters. Measurements capture partial illumination, yet they rarely correspond with the vivid motion reported by observers. Hypotheses include reflections from polished quartz, the influence of dust particles, and even subtle air currents, yet none fully explain the light's independence from predictable physics. Electronic sensors occasionally record faint electromagnetic anomalies coinciding with periods of intensified movement, though these readings are inconsistent and offer no conclusive insight. Each experiment underscores the chamber's elusiveness, as if the lights exist in a space between measurable reality and perceptual experience. Those present within the passage during the solstice frequently describe altered perception. The lights appear to respond to attention, shifting in ways that suggest a subtle interaction with observers. Some report dizziness, warmth, or a disorienting sense of temporal fluidity, while others feel an almost sentient presence, as though being watched or guided. Even individuals stationed outside the tomb describe changes in the quality of sunlight on the exterior, hinting that the effect may extend beyond the chamber itself. Human perception and the light seem intertwined, creating a shared experience that defies easy explanation and leaves participants questioning the limits of observation. As the sunbeam shifts higher in the sky, the movement of the light slows, dims, and eventually fades into the grey morning. The chamber returns to its usual shadowed quiet, yet the memory of the illumination persists, etched into the minds of those who witnessed it. Scholars continue to debate whether the solstice alignment, the variability of motion, and the apparent intelligence of the lights indicate an underlying cosmic pattern, an architectural subtlety, or a phenomenon entirely outside known physics. Each observation raises further questions. The lights are precise yet unpredictable, measurable yet intangible, fleeting yet eternal. The mystery of Newgrange endures, resisting definition and evoking wonder with each passing solstice. The moving lights continue to trace unseen paths, a secret held by stone and sunlight that no observer has ever fully captured. The missing artifacts of Mohenjo-daro. Excavations at Mohenjo-daro in the 1930s revealed a city of astonishing sophistication. Its streets laid out in precise grids, drainage channels engineered with meticulous care, and buildings that spoke to a civilization both complex and enigmatic. Archaeologists from the Archaeological Survey of India approached the site with a sense of both urgency and reverence, aware that each discovery could illuminate a world long vanished. The ruins stretched across the flat-sinned plains, silent yet alive with the imprint of thousands of years of human activity. As the team carefully removed layers of soil and debris, the air seemed to hum with anticipation, carrying the faint smell of earth and sun-baked stone. Every step along the city's remnants was measured, every surface examined, and every find meticulously recorded. Among the rubble, the team uncovered hundreds of artifacts, from intricately carved seals depicting animals and abstract motifs, to delicate ornaments, ceremonial objects, and everyday implements. Each item was carefully catalogued, photographed, and cross-referenced in handwritten ledgers, forming a comprehensive record of a civilization that had thrived millennia before. Even fragments of pottery, clay tokens, and simple tools were treated with extraordinary care, as if the act of recording their existence preserved part of the city's soul. The objects revealed a society rich in trade, ritual, and social complexity, and the archaeologists approached their work with the awareness that each artifact, no matter how small, could contribute to a broader understanding of Mohenjo-daro's urban life. Curators noted early anomalies with subtle unease. Occasionally an object appeared out of sequence in the ledgers, or a photograph failed to match an item in storage. At first, these irregularities were attributed to clerical oversight, the chaos of excavation, or the inevitable confusion of moving countless items over rough terrain. Yet over time, the frequency of discrepancies grew unsettling. Some artifacts could not be traced to their documented locations, leaving faint but persistent gaps in the otherwise meticulous records. Margin notes in the ledgers hinted at concern, and whispers among the team suggested that something beyond ordinary error might be at play, though no one could articulate what that might be. When inventories were checked more rigorously in subsequent years, the scale of the disappearance became impossible to ignore. Sealed storage cabinets, monitored carefully and intended to secure the artifacts, were found empty in places where objects had once been recorded. Rare seals, ornate tools, and ceremonial items, all accounted for in multiple records, were simply gone. The silence of the storage rooms amplified the sense of mystery. Drawers and shelves were perfectly organised yet devoid of what should have been there. There was no sign of forced entry, no documentation of removal, and no plausible explanation for how so many objects could vanish without leaving a trace. The discovery shocked curators and archaeologists alike, provoking questions that would echo for decades. Reports from the field offices reveal the immediate turmoil following the discovery. Letters, memos, and telegrams detail frantic attempts to trace each missing artifact, often documenting conflicting accounts of who last handled an object, when it was seen, and under what circumstances it might have moved. Some entries note the stress and tension among curators and archaeologists, who began questioning even their own meticulous practices. Additional efforts included the compilation of new cross-references and photographic duplicates, a painstaking attempt to safeguard knowledge that seemed to be slipping away. The urgency of these communications underscores not only the value of the artifacts themselves, but also the fragility of human systems in preserving the physical record of an entire civilization. Investigators returned repeatedly to examine the archives and storage areas, retracing every step of the cataloguing process. Ledgers were meticulously cross-checked against photographs, field notes, and shipment logs. Every cabinet, shelf, and crate was scrutinised, with hours spent searching each section in painstaking detail. Yet no missing items were ever located. Each attempt seemed only to deepen the mystery, leaving those involved with a growing sense of frustration and awe at the disappearance. The vanished artifacts, once tangible and present, existed only in documentation and memory, their physical absence casting a shadow over the city's recovered history. Archival documents suggest that the disappearance occurred during a period of administrative transition, when records and storage responsibilities shifted between offices. Some scholars propose human error, misplacement, or undocumented transfers as partial explanations. Others argue that such factors cannot account for the sheer number and significance of the missing items. The vanished objects included unique seals, ceremonial artifacts, and items crucial for understanding Mohenjo-daro's social hierarchy, trade networks, and religious practices. Their absence created gaps that scholars continue to grapple with, leaving portions of the city's story tantalizingly out of reach. The missing artifacts remain a silent testament to the fragility of human record-keeping and the limits of knowledge preserved across generations. Archival reviews, field examinations, and repeated searches have uncovered little about the missing artifacts of Mohenjo-daro. The ledges endure, photographs capture what was once present, and the city's streets and wells continue to reveal fragments of its history, yet the vanished items exist only as traces in memory and documentation. Scholars return to the mystery with each generation, approaching it with renewed rigour and determination, only to find that the enigma persists. The disappearance has become a cautionary tale within archaeology, illustrating the delicate balance between discovery and preservation, certainty and doubt, and the enduring presence of questions that defy resolution. The lost artifacts linger in imagination and record, a silent testament to a civilization whose story is only partially known. The luminous storms over Skara Brae. Records from antiquity hint at flashes of light above the Orkney coastline, describing phenomena that local communities associated with storms and restless spirits. Early oral accounts, preserved through generations, spoke of sudden glimmers in the sky that danced above the cluster of stone houses, illuminating the ruins in eerie blue and white tones. These mentions were sparse and fragmented, often embedded in stories of maritime caution or cautionary tales of misfortune. Yet the consistency across centuries suggested a phenomenon observed repeatedly, its presence tied to the harsh winter storms that swept across the islands with relentless force. The stones of Skara Brae, themselves centuries older than most historical records, seem to bear silent witness to this recurring, inexplicable illumination. Accounts emerging in the 1700s and 1800s provide a more tangible record of the luminous events. Diaries of local inhabitants and sketchbooks of visiting antiquarians occasionally captured descriptions of sudden flashes that lit up the village during coastal gales. Some sketches depict brief illuminations along the horizon, highlighting the ruins in fragmented light, while personal letters remark on the unsettling nature of these occurrences, describing them as both beautiful and unnerving. Newspapers of the period, particularly maritime bulletins, sometimes referenced glowing phenomena over Orkney's cliffs, noting that they appeared without identifiable sources and often coincided with violent wind and rainfall. The repetition of these reports over decades lent credibility to the idea that the lights were neither figments of imagination nor rare anomalies. Early meteorologists noted the luminous storms during the first decades of the 20th century, particularly as electrical measurement tools became available. Observers recorded sudden fluctuations in light intensity, noting that traditional lightning patterns did not match the displays above Skara Brae. Photographs taken during storms captured occasional glimmers on film, though the duration and motion of the light often appeared exaggerated to human eyes compared with static exposures. Reports emphasized the unpredictability of the phenomenon. Flashes might appear above one set of houses but vanish moments later over adjacent structures, suggesting a localized, transient source that defied the conventional understanding of electrical storms. In the modern era, advances in high-speed photography, atmospheric sensors, and electromagnetic monitoring offered new opportunities to study the phenomenon. Teams of researchers documented dozens of winter storms, placing equipment at precise vantage points to record luminous activity. Some instruments registered subtle fluctuations in electromagnetic fields and air ionization, but the data were inconsistent and rarely correlated with the vivid motion and intensity described by witnesses. Cameras captured occasional streaks of pale light across the ruins, yet these were fleeting and insufficient to explain the scale or timing of the flashes. Despite sophisticated equipment and careful methodology, the luminous displays retained their mysterious character, eluding full scientific explanation. Witnesses often described subtle precursors to the luminous displays, noting faint phosphorescent glows that appeared moments before the main flashes. Fishermen, shepherds, and villagers recorded changes in wind direction, sudden drops in temperature, or an eerie stillness in the air just before the lights emerged. Some accounts suggest that the flashes were accompanied by unusual cloud formations or faint electrical hums, barely perceptible but consistently noted across decades. These repeated observations hint at a natural precursor that may interact with local geography and atmospheric conditions, Yet even with modern instruments, the precise triggers remain unidentified. As observations continued, patterns began to take shape, yet irregularity remained a defining trait. The lights predominantly appeared during periods of high wind and storm activity, with a preference for deep winter nights when the sky was darkest. Their colour varied from electric blue to soft white, occasionally interspersed with hints of green, as if responding to atmospheric conditions that were still poorly understood. Movements were unpredictable. Some flashes moved in linear arcs, others flickered in place, and occasionally a series of points would pulse rhythmically across the horizon. Scholars noted that the spatial distribution of the lights rarely repeated precisely, suggesting either multiple sources or a phenomenon influenced by a combination of terrain, weather, and unknown atmospheric variables. Certain formations within the island's geology seem to influence the occurrence of the mysterious lights. The area's bedrock contains fissures and mineral veins that could interact with electrical charges in the atmosphere, producing localized luminescence during storms. Salt-laden winds sweeping across the coast may further influence ionization, while variations in humidity and temperature amplify the effect in ways that are difficult to predict. Although no single factor fully accounts for the intensity or movement of the lights, this combination of coastal geology, mineral composition, and meteorological conditions provides a tantalizing framework for understanding a phenomenon that has resisted explanation for centuries. Comparisons with other unexplained atmospheric phenomena have been made, from St. Elmo's fire to auroral glows, yet none fully accounts for the intensity, location, or behaviour of the luminous storms at Skara Brae. Researchers considered ionization effects, electrical discharges in turbulent air, and rare optical refraction phenomena, but even combined explanations failed to replicate the light's persistence and movement. Unlike typical meteorological events, the luminous storms seemed intimately tied to the location of the ruins, appearing above the structures themselves rather than solely in open sky. The consistency over centuries, across generations of observers and varied scientific approaches, highlights an anomaly that remains as compelling as it is inexplicable. Through centuries of observation, the luminous storms above Skara Brae have resisted categorization. They appear, vanish, and return with the cycles of weather, leaving behind astonished witnesses, meticulous records, and photographs that only hint at the spectacle experienced firsthand. Each layer of documentation, from oral tales to modern monitoring, reinforces the phenomenon's elusiveness, revealing a pattern that is persistent yet defies replication. The ruins, silent and ancient, continue to stand beneath these fleeting illuminations, their stones witnessing a mystery that endures across time and science. The lights dance above the ruins, a ghostly rhythm untouched by human understanding. The preserved skeletons of Catalhoyuk. Upon stepping into the excavation, the air carried an almost imperceptible stillness, as though centuries had settled into the walls themselves. Mud brick homes stretched in narrow labyrinths, but one chamber seemed to exist slightly apart from the flow of time. Shadows from narrow openings fell across the floor, revealing skeletal forms that had lain untouched yet astonishingly intact. The walls, mottled with faint plaster and pigment traces, suggested that human life had once moved vigorously through this space, yet the remains gave the impression that time had paused entirely. Archaeologists noted a quiet dissonance. The skeletons resisted the expected decay, preserving an eerie presence that hinted at forces beyond the ordinary passage of centuries. The skeletons lay untouched, yet their condition was remarkable. Bones maintained articulation with unusual precision. Finger and toe bones were intact, cranial sutures clearly defined, and long bones showed minimal erosion despite centuries in variable soil conditions. Some skeletons rested in positions that implied careful placement, their postures neither casual nor haphazard. Subtle signs of wear on the surfaces suggested movement after death, though the mechanisms remained elusive. Even the smallest details, the curvature of ribs, the alignment of vertebrae, seemed to defy the natural processes of decomposition, preserving a sense of presence that was almost palpable. The layout of the chamber hinted at patterns invisible at first glance. Certain skeletons were clustered along plastered walls, others oriented toward niches whose function has long been debated. The relative spacing of each skeleton appeared deliberate, as if arranged according to rules that are now lost. Some lay near hearths, their bones reflecting the faint warmth once radiating from fires that fueled daily life. Observers noted that these placements repeated subtle patterns throughout the room, indicating an intentional organization that survived the centuries almost perfectly. Among broken shards and pigments, fragments of pottery and clay objects were found, interspersed with the remains. Some vessels bore wear patterns suggesting extended use, yet their position alongside remarkably preserved skeletons created a chronological paradox. Traces of red ochre clung to wall fragments, while small stone tools, beads and shells lay in careful proximity to skeletal forms. These objects hinted at cultural or symbolic significance, suggesting that the arrangement of the dead may have been intertwined with everyday life or ritual practice in ways that remain incomprehensible. Tests conducted by modern teams revealed anomalies that only deepened the mystery. Isotopic analysis confirmed dietary patterns consistent with other Çatalhöyük inhabitants, yet microbial assays detected remarkably low bacterial activity. Bone chemistry showed no signs of mineralization or calcification sufficient to account for preservation. Even small fragments of hair and cartilage, rarely surviving in comparable Neolithic contexts, retained structural integrity. Attempts to replicate these conditions experimentally failed, emphasizing that something about the chamber, the materials, or an unknown process had arrested the natural decay of these bodies. Marks on the surrounding walls and floors suggest the chamber may have been revisited repeatedly after the skeletons were placed. Small scratches, displaced debris, and faint smudges indicate human or animal interaction, yet these interventions were surprisingly subtle, leaving the majority of the skeletons undisturbed. Such evidence raises questions about whether the chamber was part of a continuing ritual practice, or if these interactions were incidental, further complicating attempts to understand how preservation and placement intersected over centuries. Subtle environmental features may have played a role, though explanations remain incomplete. Ventilation through narrow doorways and slight differences in floor elevation could have influenced moisture retention, while mineral-rich soil may have interacted with organic material to slow decomposition. Yet these factors alone cannot explain the uniformity of preservation across multiple skeletons or the exact articulation of their bones. Every new observation raised further questions, reinforcing a sense that the chamber itself was more than a passive container. It functioned as a participant in an enduring, unexplained process. Because the chamber floors contained subtle pockets of soil with unusually high mineral content, microenvironments formed that may have contributed to the skeleton's preservation. Small depressions in the clay absorbed moisture differently from surrounding areas, while traces of salts and rare minerals appeared concentrated near certain remains. These variations did not fully explain why some skeletons were perfectly articulated while others showed minor displacement, yet they hinted at a hidden environmental complexity that had been overlooked in previous surveys. Historical comparisons provide little clarification. Other Neolithic sites show partial preservation, but none exhibit the combination of intact articulation, placement patterns, and artifact association found here. Researchers speculated on lost mortuary practices, perhaps designed to protect or venerate the dead, though no ethnographic or archaeological analogues fully align. The juxtaposition of daily objects with perfectly preserved skeletons suggests a nuanced system of treatment whose meaning remains inaccessible, offering glimpses of intent but never full comprehension. Even as scientific methods have advanced, the chamber continues to challenge interpretation. Computer modelling of airflow and moisture, isotopic testing, and microbiological studies all hint at potential contributors, yet no single explanation accounts for the entire phenomenon. The skeletons persist as anomalies in both biology and chronology, their presence a quiet rebellion against conventional understanding of time, decay, and human mortality. Observers leave with a sense of awe, as though the past itself lingers here, momentarily suspended and refusing to yield its secrets. Time itself seemed unsettled in the chamber. Each bone, each artifact, and each faint trace of pigment suggested an enduring resistance to the flow of centuries. Even after meticulous study, the skeleton's presence challenges human assumptions, reminding us that the past may preserve more than facts. It may preserve mysteries that defy comprehension. The bones exist as if time itself has paused, keeping secrets no living witness can fully uncover. the time drift at Chichen Itza. Aligned with the solstice sun, the Pyramid of Kukulkan dominates the surrounding plaza, its steps casting shadows that trace precise arcs across the stone floor. From a distance, the site appears perfectly ordered, a testament to the Mayas' astronomical knowledge and architectural skill. Yet among these predictable movements, subtle anomalies have long been reported. Shadows sometimes linger longer than expected, sunlight skims surfaces at odd angles, and the progression of day seems, at times, imperceptibly slowed or hastened. The pyramid is not merely a static monument, it behaves like a temporal instrument, where the ordinary rhythm of hours and minutes can drift in ways that defy explanation. Long before mechanical clocks existed, chroniclers and explorers noted unusual temporal effects at Chichen Itza. Early European visitors reported festival dates seemingly shifting over the years, while indigenous oral accounts described moments when the sun or stars appeared slightly out of place, as if the sky itself was subtly altered. Though these records were often dismissed as myth or observational error, they suggest that the Maya may have been aware, intuitively or through careful observation, of fluctuations in temporal flow around their monumental structures. Mechanical instruments recorded these deviations with increasing precision during modern investigations. Atomic clocks, chronometers, and high-speed cameras placed at key points on the pyramid and across the plaza consistently detected small but measurable discrepancies in elapsed time. Instruments synchronized at dawn would occasionally diverge by several seconds within hours, only to realign unpredictably. Environmental variables, temperature, humidity, geomagnetic flux, were carefully controlled, yet the anomaly persisted. Each test confirmed that Chichen Itza interacts with time in a manner both subtle and undeniable. Observers reported an unsettling disorientation during these periods. Steps taken across the plaza seemed mismatched to the passage of seconds. Conversations appeared to lag or stretch, and even experienced scientists admitted to a subtle, inexplicable awareness that the usual flow of hours was irregular. Some described fleeting déjà vu or the sensation that events repeated with slight variation, reinforcing the impression that time at the site has its own rhythm, independent of human measurement. Unexpected discrepancies emerged in event timing, where independent recordings of ritual ceremonies, bell chimes, and even visitor movements produced conflicting timestamps. Cameras and audio recorders, synchronized before the experiments, would show slight desynchronization as events unfolded, sometimes differing by several seconds or more. The drift was not uniform, it occasionally reversed, appearing as if moments stretched and contracted unpredictably. These anomalies occurred without an obvious external cause, challenging both human perception and digital measurement, suggesting that time at Chichen Itza itself may be intrinsically unstable during certain alignments or environmental conditions. Cycles emerged irregularly, hinting at a hidden order. Drift was often more pronounced during solstices and equinoxes, yet these occurrences were inconsistent. Some days the sun's shadow fell exactly where expected. On others, instruments recorded deviations of several seconds, enough to disturb precise astronomical calculations. Attempts to correlate these irregularities with celestial mechanics or seasonal environmental shifts produced patterns too complex to fully quantify. The timing anomalies seem governed by factors beyond current scientific understanding, suggesting a subtle interplay between architecture, solar positioning, and perhaps forces as yet unknown. Mechanical instruments alone could not capture the full scope of the phenomenon. High-resolution sensors, laser timing devices, and multi-axis gyroscopes all recorded variations, while simultaneous human observation noted perceptual dissonance. Witnesses described a peculiar compression or expansion of time when standing near the pyramid's steps, sometimes aligning with brief gusts of wind or the shift of sunlight across carved reliefs. Even subtle vibrations from nearby plazas or distant animal movement appeared to coincide with minimal but measurable fluctuations, reinforcing the sense that both physical and perceptual dimensions are affected. Ancient inscriptions suggest the Maya may have understood, at least partially, this temporal irregularity. Calendar glyphs and temple carvings reference periods within periods, cycles nested within larger cycles, and rules for adjusting ceremonial timing to harmonize with the cosmic rhythms. Some glyphs appear to encode instructions for observing solar and stellar positions in relation to ritual events, hinting that time at Chichen Itza was treated not as a constant, but as a variable to be measured, anticipated, and reconciled with celestial patterns. These historical echoes suggest that the temporal drift noted today is not entirely new, but has been acknowledged, perhaps even calculated, by the builders themselves. A definitive cause became the focus of recent scientific investigations. Geophysicists, chronologists, and astronomers placed multiple instruments throughout the site, monitoring shadow angles, atomic clock discrepancies, and geomagnetic readings simultaneously. Each experiment confirmed the existence of drift, yet no single environmental, astronomical, or physical factor provided a complete explanation. Some theorized localized magnetic anomalies or subtle gravitational influences, while others speculated on thermal expansion, structural vibration, or acoustic resonance as contributing factors. None accounted for the precision and irregularity of the observed effects, leaving the phenomenon open to ongoing inquiry. Even the plaza itself seems to interact with time. The alignment of ball courts, terraces, and the pyramid steps produces shadow and light patterns that vary subtly with solar position. On days of maximum drift, shadows appear to stretch across multiple steps at once, a movement inconsistent with ordinary solar mechanics. Observers have reported slight distortions in the perception of vertical height or distance, a phenomenon correlated with periods when instruments register the greatest temporal discrepancy. This convergence of architectural, astronomical, and perceptual factors suggests that Chichen Itza functions as a nexus where human measurement and natural chronology intersect unpredictably. The drift at Chichen Itza continues to defy explanation, resisting understanding even after centuries of observation and decades of study. Precise instruments, historical records, and human experience all confirm its presence, yet its cause continues to elude comprehension. The anomaly challenges assumptions about the constancy of time, suggesting that under certain conditions, it can be experienced differently, measured differently, and perhaps influenced by the convergence of architecture, astronomy, and natural forces. Scholars and visitors alike are confronted with a structure that is not merely a monument of the past, but an enduring enigma that bends perception itself. Time here bends in ways no chronometer or calendar can fully account for.